The Express, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, we're going now to Gloria De Piero and Christopher Hope because it's Prime Minister's Questions and they're in our Westminster studio.
Yes, and you know what we want to do for people at home listening or watching. We want to know what our viewers and listeners would be asking the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, or indeed the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Angela Rayner, because it's the deputies today, the battle of the deputies.
Yeah, that's right. Please do send us your questions. Tell us who you are and, as importantly, where you're from. We'll put your questions to our panel. Email or go online, to gbnews.com/yoursay. PMQs Live is all about you, not about us. But Bevan Andrew, briefly, what will you be asking the Deputy Prime Minister today?
I'd ask Oliver Dowden, by the way, I think it's deeply unimpressive. I would ask him, does he think the French police are doing enough to stop migrants getting into those small boats across the Channel?
Oh. Bev?
And probably on that similar theme, I would say that if the planes now take off for Rwanda and if they prove not to be a deterrent, what is Plan B?
Plan B,
Very
well,
good.
Very good questions.
I think your questions are getting better every week.
Stronger, but that's enough of Bevan Andrew. It's fast approaching midday.
This is GB News, Britain's election channel. PMQs Live starts right now. On Wednesday, the 24th of April. This is PMQs Live on GB News with Christopher Hope and Gloria De Piero.
In just one moment, the Prime Minister's Deputy Oliver Dowden and Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner will go head-to-head at Prime Minister's Questions in the House of Commons. We'll have full coverage of every moment, every spit and cough, and getting full reaction from Armed Forces Minister Leo Doherty and Shadow Minister of State at the Cabinet Office, Baroness Jenny Chapman.
So, let's go straight to you, Jenny Chapman, as the Labour spokesperson today. What would you be asking the Deputy Prime Minister? What should Angela Rayner be going on?
It is what you might call a target-rich environment at the moment. So we could go on the length of time it's taking people to get hospital treatment. We could go on crime and policing.
You can only have one.
But you can only have one. I would be tempted, given the news we've had this week, that mortgage rates are not coming down like people thought they would, and people are really struggling to make those monthly payments at the moment. I think something to do with the housing market, be that leasehold, renters or mortgages. I think that's something that people are talking about. People want to hear the Labour Party take the government on over. So I wouldn't be surprised, given that that's something that Angela Rayner is responsible for in her department as well, in communities. That might be something she might want to raise.
Leo Doherty, that's a worrying question, isn't it? Because that is out of your control, interest rates.
Well, I think interest rates are a function of the overall economic picture, which has a positive trend thanks to our wise management of the economy. We've seen inflation decreasing, and in terms of people paying their mortgages, which I think is at the heart of Jenny's question, you know, they're better off under a Tory government because we will safely manage the economy.
Who is saying that? I haven't heard anyone say they're feeling better off with their mortgage under this government, ever.
Before we go to the House of Commons, before PMQs starts in about 35 seconds' time, Angela Rayner, your spokesperson today, she stands in for the Labour leader when the Prime Minister is not taking questions because he is in Germany. She's been in the news a lot, so it could be quite difficult for her because there are many questions which have yet to be answered, I think it's fair to say.
Oh, I mean, the Tories are desperate to find something on this woman. They're going back in, 10 years ago, where she might have lived, who she might have been living with, all of that. Desperate stuff. She's a fighter. She's going to take that argument to the Tories today on behalf of the Labour Party. Yeah. I think she's a really strong parliamentary performer, and I would not want to be in Oliver Dowden's shoes facing her across the box.
It's not Tories, though. It's journalists, isn't it? At the Times, the Mail on Sunday, the Telegraph, the Sun, they're all asking neighbours about Angela Rayner. It's not Tories, it's journalists.
It's extraordinary. I mean, I saw her child's birth certificate printed in the newspaper, and to be honest, that's when it lost me, this story. I thought, this is too much. They're hounding her. But the police are having a look. She's going to give anybody any answers that they want from the police or the tax authorities. You know, we'll get to the bottom of it.
Leo Doherty, just quickly on you. You've announced it's a huge amount of defence spending, but the army's tiny. Is the money going on weapons or soldiers?
It'll go on all of that. It'll
what, soldiers too?
It'll go
more on more soldiers.
It'll go on a whole range of institutional investment. It's a massive strategic investment for resilience and increased lethality and availability right across all three services. So it's a huge vote of confidence in our armed forces.
Will our soldiers have better accommodation to live in, because that is something which has frequently come under the spotlight?
Yeah, I know those issues because I deal with them in Aldershot. We are ploughing billions into accommodation. The vast majority, 97%, is up to scratch, but of course we get judged quite rightly on that which isn't. So that is a constant effort, and we are putting billions of pounds into the first-class accommodation.
And the challenge for you, Baroness Chapman, is that Labour won't match the Tory spending plans on defence, will they?
Well, we've got to get to 2.5%. We agree with that. We're going to have a strategic defence spending review, and we will make sure that that money is found to get there when we can do it. Unlike the Tories, though, we're not going to make some sort of pledge without saying where the money's going to come from. We don't do pledges without plans. We want to make sure that this is done for real. We've all spoken to people in the armed forces who are concerned about their kit, about the equipment that they've been given, as Gloria says, about their accommodation. We want to get this right for our armed forces.
Boris Johnson, when he was Prime Minister, did announce this, and nothing came on stream, if you like.
Well, we've put our money where our mouths are now. This is fully funded, and
it wasn't in the budget.
Here we go.
This is real.
I think we're seeing him arrive now in the House of Commons there. I think Oliver Dowden is not yet standing at the dispatch box.
This will be the last question. Well, I think we're listening to Northern Ireland questions. That's the Secretary of State. Oh, and I think the Speaker is taking another question in Northern Ireland questions. Now, OK, let's get back to what Jenny Chapman said about your attacks on Angela Rayner. They said they are desperate. How do you respond to that? I mean, aren't there bigger fish to fry?
Well, I think there are certainly bigger fish to fry. I think she could put this to bed by just simply coming clean on her tax advice that she received, and whether or not she...
Why is it massively adopting?
Because I think it's a matter of integrity. There are clearly questions to be asked. She can answer them, and hopefully she'll use this opportunity today to do that. But
it's not her questions, is it? It's you. It's the government.
Well, it's journalists, actually. I mean, it's journalists that are understandably asking these questions. She's engulfed in scandal. Let's hope she clears it up today. And if she doesn't, Keir Starmer should show a bit of leadership.
He's got a point, though, isn't it? I mean, it is basically coming clean about all this properly.
Look, she said that, one, she will provide any information that's needed by the police and HMRC, not to random Tory MPs or, with the best will in the world, journalists. And two, that if there is any wrongdoing found, that she'll resign. What more can we ask of her? You know, she's doing everything she could be expected to do.
Let's go to the chamber now, where Oliver Dowden is answering questions from, well, all of MPs, including Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Jonathan Gillis.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I have been asked to reply. I know that members across the House will wish to join me in offering condolences to the family and friends of Lord Frank Field. He was an outstanding parliamentarian who worked tirelessly to make society a better place. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, is in Berlin. He has announced the biggest strengthening of our defence in a generation. And Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that members will also want to join me in wishing the Jewish community a happy Passover, a celebration of freedom. But of course, we remember the empty chairs of those hostages still being held captive in Gaza and call for their immediate release. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Jonathan Gillis.
Mr. Speaker, I too would like to pass on my thoughts and prayers to Lord Field's family, friends and colleagues, and particularly the students and teachers at the Birches Head Academy in Stoke-on-Trent who are part
of the Frankfield Education Trust. Mr. Speaker, since being elected in 2019, I've helped reopen Tunstall Town Hall with a new library and family hub, secured funding for additional CCTV, a new alley gate and better lighting in Tunstall to make sure our streets are safe. Breathing new life as well into Tunstall's old library and Bath thanks to this government's levelling up fund of £56 million to Stoke-on-Trent. But sadly, Labour-led Stoke-on-Trent City Council seek to undermine this progress by introducing a brand new garden tax on residents to have their garden waste collected, refuse to take cunning enforcement against rogue and absent landlords who plague Tunstall High Street, and are increasing crime and antisocial behaviour by dumping undesirable people in the centre of Tunstall's Sneed Arms Hotel. Does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that Stoke-on-Trent Labour...
Order. It's not Mr. Gullis who's loud, so please, let me hear it.
It just goes to show the disdain the Labour Party have for Stoke-on-Trent. So does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me? It's time for Stoke-on-Trent Labour to axe the garden tax, to take the fight to lousy landlords... Order.
There is a question to be asked, and there is a time in which we ask it. I suggest he puts in for an adjournment debate. I'm sure you've got the answer.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's not much I can add to that. He has ever proved what an excellent campaigner he is for his constituents. And of course, he highlights the same problems with Labour councils across the country, raising taxes and letting services fall into disrepair. And of course, he's totally right to be holding rogue landlords to account.
Right, we now come to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I first of all share with the Deputy Prime Minister's comments regarding our Jewish community and a happy Passover, and also start by acknowledging the loss of David Marquand and Baroness Massey, both of whom made historic contributions in this Parliament, politics and wider life. And also send my condolences following today's news to the family of Lord Frankfield, who is a good friend of mine and a colleague, and who was a tireless campaigner against poverty and a champion for his constituents. Mr. Speaker, I know the party opposite is desperate to talk about my living arrangements, but the public want to know what this government is going to do about theirs. Natalie from Brighton has been served with 2 no-fault eviction notices in 18 months. She joins nearly 1 million families at risk of homelessness due to his party's failure to ban this cruel practice. Now, instead of obsessing over my house, when will he get a grip and show the same obsession with ending no-fault evictions?
Well, to begin with, it is a pleasure to have another exchange with the Right Honourable Lady in this House, our 5th in 12 months. Any more of these, and she'll be claiming it as her principal residence. On the issue of no-fault evictions, it may have escaped the Right Honourable Lady's attention, but we will be voting on exactly that matter later today. The Conservative government taking action.
Mr. Speaker, he clearly thought he could spend all week obsessing over my living arrangements. I didn't even bother to read up on his own government's bill this afternoon. The reality is he caved in to vested interests on his backbenchers and delayed justice for people like Natalie. Yes. This week, the Housing Minister said there is no solid date for banning no-fault evictions. The Housing Secretary now says it won't happen before an election. So if he can give us a date, can he name it now? Sure.
I can name the date for the Right Honourable Lady today. It's today that this House will be voting on it, and I'm confident that in line with our manifesto, we will deliver on that commitment.
Angela Rayner.
Mr Speaker, he clearly hasn't been looking up on his own government bills. But let me turn to another Tory housing failure. Leaseholds are a rip-off and a con. But the government's proposed ban on new leaseholds applies only to houses. The majority of leaseholds are in flats. What's the point on a ban on new leaseholds if it won't apply to flats?
Again, the Right Honourable Lady is talking about legislation introduced by this government, which the party opposite totally failed to introduce in their entire time in office. And it's no surprise, because it's this government which has brought social housing waiting lists down by nearly 500,000 and delivered more affordable homes in the last year and last 12 years than Labour delivered when they were in office. But of course, all of this can only be paid for by making sure that we have a strong economy. And I'll tell you, her policy to repeal every single Conservative trade union law in the first 100 days would open the door to French-style wildcat strikes, sweeping away the reforms that made this country great. And we all know, though, Mr Speaker, the one reform that the Right Honourable Lady would not abolish from Margaret Thatcher, the right to buy your council house.
Mr Speaker, I was expecting a little bit better from him today. He seems to be a bit worn out. Maybe it's the 3 a.m. calls from the bad men that have been keeping him up at night. But he also, Mr Speaker, he also talks about strikes and the unions. We've had more strikes under this government's watch than any time before. And once again, he hasn't read his own bill. Their ban on leasehold won't apply to the majority of people. It's like banning non-doms but exempting Tory prime ministers. And he speaks about affordable homes. Families are trapped in temporary accommodation and stuck on waiting lists. And in the West Midlands, his mayor has used his multi-million-pound housing budget to build just 46 social homes in 8 years. That's almost as many as the Chancellor's property portfolio. But the British people know that his party won't build the homes that this country needs. So when are they going to get a chance to vote for a government that will?
Well, I'm surprised the Right Honourable Lady raises the West Midlands when Labour-controlled Birmingham have virtually bankrupted the council, are hiking up council tax by 21%, whilst in the meantime, and I'm sure this would please her, continuing to hand out £1.8 million to the trade unions. By contrast, Andy Street, our brilliant mayor of the wider West Midlands, has delivered £6.1 billion of investment to improve transport. So there you have it, the contrast between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. The usual political opportunism from her, failing to ask about the issues that really matter. If you want more bins, if you want more bin collections, more potholes filled, lower debt and lower council tax, vote Conservative, because whether it's Ben Houchin in the Tees Valley or whether it's Andy Street in the West Midlands, it's only the Conservative mayors who deliver more for less.
Well, Mr Speaker, that's pretty revealing that he thinks that housing isn't an issue for the British people, because I think it really is. And people in glass houses shouldn't throw the stones, because in Birmingham and across the whole of this country, councils are facing black holes because of his government's austerity programme. And I would also warn the Deputy Prime Minister that Tory councils have also faced 114 notices, and Birmingham Council has had over £1 billion taken from their budget from some of the poorest people. More than 16,000 families face losing their homes after the party's mini-budget, Mr Speaker, and mortgage bills continue to soar. Meanwhile, the former Prime Minister parades around the world in a twisted victory lap promoting a new book, saying that the mini-budget was her proudest moment. So since she won't apologise to those families losing their home, will he?
Well, Well, what the Prime Minister has done since he has taken office with the Chancellor is to restore stability to our economy, inflation halved and more down to 3%. And as a result of that, in an increasingly dangerous world, the Prime Minister was able to announce his plan for the biggest strengthening of defence spending in a generation. But it should come as no surprise that the party opposite refused to say whether they back it or not, because this comes from the Right Honourable Lady who voted to scrap Trident and install in Downing Street someone who wanted to change the army into a Peace Corps. There you have it.
Mr. Speaker, friends, we all want to see 2.5%. The difference is that we haven't cut the army to its smallest size since Napoleon. And Mr. Speaker, never mind some secretive deep state. Never mind some secretive deep state. It's the state of the Tory party that's the problem. They're in a deep state of sewerage. After 14 years, they failed renters, they failed leaseholders, and they failed mortgage holders. But, Mr. Speaker, I read with interest that the Right Honourable Gentleman has been urging his neighbour in number 10 to call an election because he's worried they might get wiped out. Has he finally realised that when he stabbed Boris Johnson in the back to get his mate into number 10, he was ditching their biggest election winner for a pint-sized loser?
I think the whole House will have heard, despite all the bluster from the lady opposite, not a single word on whether she would actually back our plans to invest in our armed forces. No plans in a dangerous world. And of course, as ever, the Deputy Leader is always looking to attack others' failures, but never the one to take responsibility for her own. She once said, "You shouldn't be waiting for the police to bang on your door. If you did it, then you shouldn't be doing your job." The Right Honourable Landlady should forget her tax advice and follow her own advice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And levelling up, like my friend earlier, in the Calder Valley is absolutely on fire. 196.5 million for hospital reconfiguration, 150 million for flood defences, no fewer than 11 schools being remodelled or rebuilt as we speak. 45 million for 3 town centre regeneration, and Elland is getting a new railway station as well. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that the naysayers around about levelling up need look no further than the Calder Valley to see what a great achievement this government is doing?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. It's not just the Colne Valley, but it's communities up and down the country. The government is investing billions in infrastructure across the United Kingdom, creating jobs and opportunities in every region. And I know that my honourable friend has been a staunch advocate for the Calder Valley, which is a fantastic example of that in action.
It's Leader of the SNP, Murray Black.
May I join in wishing the Jewish community a happy Passover and also in sending my condolences to the families of family and loved ones of Frank Field. 2 years ago, when mass graves were discovered in Ukraine, this House united in condemnation and rightly treated these graves as evidence of war crimes which Russia must be made to answer for. Yesterday, Palestinian officials uncovered 2 mass graves outside the bombed hospitals in Gaza. These graves also constitute as a war crime, don't they?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, of course, we would expect the democratic government of Israel to investigate any allegations of misconduct, and that's exactly what they do, and it's exactly what the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister urge them to do. But I find it quite extraordinary that she seeks to draw parallels between the legitimate war of self-defence of Israel and the conduct of Russia.
Very black.
300 bodies, including the elderly and the injured, some of which had been stripped naked, mutilated, with their hands tied behind their backs. The UK's own arms policy states that if there is even a risk that war crimes may be taking place, then that is reason enough to halt the sale of arms. Given all we know, why then is the Prime Minister yet to do so?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, we continue to urge the Israeli government to investigate any allegations of misconduct. The difference, though, is that we can trust the Israeli government, a democratically elected government, to properly investigate those things. And of course, we keep the advice under review. The Foreign Secretary has recently made it clear that he has conducted a determination and has not changed his advice regarding export licences, and I think that is the correct decision.
Colin McCartney.
Speaker, the good people of Lincoln who all declare their taxes and pay tax on their profit when selling their second homes overwhelmingly want Lincoln Christmas Market to be brought back after the Labour-run City Council cruelly closed it last year. The Labour City Councils refused to do what the people of Lincoln want. What message will the Deputy Prime Minister send to the voters of Lincoln before next week's local elections?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I'm afraid that what the honourable gentleman has described is the Grinch in action. That Christmas market in the home of the Magna Carta was beloved by local residents. They have totally ignored the wishes of local residents and cancelled it, and they should reverse that decision.
Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Liberal Democrats, may I also offer our condolences to the friends and family of the late Lord Frank Field, and to wish a happy Passover to all those in the Jewish community. Mr. Speaker, unpaid carers have shared heartbreaking stories of how they have been hounded by the DWP and told to pay huge fines for minor infringements on carers' allowance earning rules, all because the government failed to do anything about a problem they have known about for years. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, one of the Prime Minister's own dementia advisers resigned, saying that this government's treatment of those unpaid carers was beyond the pale. So will the Deputy Prime Minister apologise to all those unpaid carers who have been failed by his government and commit to a full review of the system?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, I pay tribute to all those unpaid carers. Indeed, I met some of them over the weekend. I know how hard they work, and they keep our society functioning through their commitment to us. And that's why we've actually uprated the benefits by £81.90 a week and increased the carers allowance by almost £1,500 since 2010. Now, in respect of allegations of overpayment, of course, appropriate discretion should be shown, but if it is the case that there have been erroneous overpayments, it's right on behalf of the taxpayer to be able to recuperate those. But of course, we'll work with anyone who's struggling with those repayments to negotiate sustainable and affordable repayment plans.
Virginia Crosby.
Mr. Speaker, my Ireland constituency of Unismore is accessed via two bridges, the Menai Suspension Bridge and the Britannia Bridge. Holyhead is the second busiest port in the UK, but bridge repairs and the weather can result in long traffic queues. To make the most of our Anglesey Freeport and new nuclear at Wilver, a third crossing is vital. And last year, the Welsh Labour government scrapped plans for all new road projects, including our third bridge. On behalf of my Unismore constituents, will the Deputy Prime Minister use his influence to ensure that North Wales is not ignored by Cardiff and we get that third bridge?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I know and understand the frustration across Wales, and particularly in the Honourable Lady's constituency, with this state of affairs. The Welsh Government have not prioritised building new roads. They're damaging growth potential in places like Anglesey. They're spending over £100 million on new politicians. And we will work with the Right Honourable Lady to make sure we resolve this.
Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative candidate for London Mayor
has promoted Islamophobic tropes online.
Shame on her.
Endorsed the beliefs of Enoch Powell.
Wow.
And claimed the black community has a problem with crimes. In the week that we marked the 31st anniversary of the murder of Stephen Lawrence, does the Deputy Prime Minister really endorse these views?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I think the Honourable Lady knows that she does not correctly represent the views of the candidate, and I find it extraordinary that she raises the issue of crime, because whilst Labour's London Mayor has increased the precept by over 70%. Actually, recorded crime has increased 20% in London. That is the record of the Labour London Mayor, and no wonder people will be voting against him.
Cheryl Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I note that I'm the chair of the Fisheries APPG and thank the government for the recent pollock catch compensation. On the 12th of May, we will see the first ever National Fishing Remembrance Day. I'll be marking this occasion by laying a wreath at a service being held at Lew Quayside by the memorial plaque, which has the name of my late husband and unfortunately others on it. Will the Deputy Prime Minister, and will he ask the Prime Minister to mark this occasion by remembering those who have died, bringing this important food source to our table?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I know how important this is to the Honourable Lady, and I'm sure she will be remembering her late husband Neil on this day. It's important that we all recognise the sacrifices made by fishermen and women to bring food to our table, and I know that my colleague Minister Spencer will be visiting Grimsby on that day.
Weston.
Mr. Speaker, in today's Northern Echo, Borough Chairman Steve Gibson describes the Mayor of Tees Valley as having given away the future of the region's children. He was referring to the 40% of Tees Works with a forecast worth of £500 million gifted by Lord Houchin in a deal to two local business mates. Mr. Gibson, who helped establish the Local Development Corporation, describes it as unforgivable. Will the government finally admit Lord Houchin and the Conservatives have sold the Teesside taxpayers down the river?
He talks about Teesside taxpayers. Actually, Ben Houchin has never imposed a mayoral precept in Tees Valley, full stop. And actually, at the same time, he's saved Teesside Airport and secured a new free port for Teesside. No wonder people will be voting for him again.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask my right honourable friend if he has seen the video that is doing the rounds of the theft in the shop in my constituency, Station Road, Boots the Chemist. In a space of 8 minutes, two threatening individuals robbed thousands of pounds out of that shop. And they're not alone. This is happening again and again and again. In fact, one of my team went out and photographed them leaving, brazenly, not caring and even spitting at the police. Will he now please say to the Home Secretary, through to the police, this is not a petty crime. This is a threat of violence and massive robbery. This should be a priority for the police. What we just talk about always is more police. Surely what we should be asking to be is more effective policing and get them off the streets.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I think my right honourable friend is absolutely right to highlight this, and often it's the allegedly lower-level crimes are the ones that cause the biggest impact on communities. And I know that my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, has been very clear on that point, and I will make it to him again. Is also why we're rolling out a range of crime prevention measures through the Safer Streets Fund, improving CCTV and street lighting, and we introduced the Police Crime and Sentencing Courts Act, again to give greater powers to the police to deliver tougher sentences for more serious offenders.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier on in the session, the Deputy Prime Minister said that when the Prime Minister and Chancellor took office, they restored stability to the UK economy. Who does he think caused the instability?
They might might want to forget it, but I remember the day the Conservatives came into office in 2010, and what was the note left on the desk of the Chief Secretary? There is no money left. That is the challenge that we have addressed through the Prime Minister and Chancellor successively.
Mr. Speaker, Labour's mayoral candidate...
That was the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, with a joke about the 2010, by the way, all about no money left in for Labour Party, taking questions in the House of Commons in place of Rishi Sunak, who's in Berlin, about to have a press conference. We've left that early because we do know we want to go to that press conference starting at around 12:45. We're still here in the studio in Westminster for GB News, joined by Armed Forces Minister Leo Doherty and Shadow Minister for State for the Cabinet Office, Baroness Chapman, Jenny Chapman.
And you've been sending your questions in to gbnews@gbnews.com for our panel, because remember, this programme is different, all about your questions. So, without further ado...
Yes, indeed. Well, lots coming in, and plenty about the army. Now, we've had one from Jackie, to you first, I think, Baroness Chapman. She says successive governments have cut defence spending and police spending, including Labour. You're as bad as each other.
Well, I would say to that we want to do right by our armed forces. I come from Darlington, near Catterick, really big army town. Not long ago, I was in the top of Norway with the Marines, listening to what they had to say. The Labour Party has never been more committed to our armed services and to our veterans as well. And we will spend...
Try and get to 2.5% of GDP?
But we will do it for real. You know, we're not just coming out and saying, yeah, 2.5%, the month after there's been a budget, where if this was serious, this commitment should have been in the budget and it should have all been costed. We're going to do this for real. We're not like the Tories. We're not sort of in a desperate corner trying to throw out promises to make people happy. We're in the serious business of forming the next government if the British people give us that privilege, and we will make sure, as is the first responsibility of any government, is to keep this country safe.
Okay.
And we have the Armed Forces Minister with us, Leo Doherty. And so just to repeat, really, Jackie's question, successive governments have decreased defence spending and police spending. So her point really is that on a day which you should be feeling very proud, Jackie's really got no confidence in any politician to sort out our forces or our police.
Well, she should have confidence. We have announced today the largest boost to defence investment in a generation. It's fully funded, and it reflects the necessity, given the international environment, for us to do that. And I think what was striking about PMQs is that Angela Rayner did not match that commitment. Labour refused to put a date on 2.5%. And it's not actually surprising, given that people like Angela Rayner voted against Trident and supported Jeremy Corbyn, let's remember, a leader who wanted to abolish NATO. So their credibility on defence is pretty slim.
But they might say that this announcement, this pledge, was first made by two Prime Ministers ago. Two of your Prime Ministers, Boris Johnson, nothing happened. Why should they believe you this time?
Well, because we've put a plan in place to deliver that money. Boris pointed the direction, given the outrageous invasion of Ukraine. Rishi Sunak has continued that. This is a massive boost. It's real money. It's costed. And I think it reflects the deteriorating international...
Well, it's paid for by cutting civil service jobs, isn't it, Leo Doherty? Can you do that? It's very hard to cut civil service jobs.
Well, we need to get the civil service back to the size that it was prior to COVID. There's been an additional 72,000, so we need to achieve workforce optimisation. We can also channel some of our growing R&D budget into defence, because we need that industrial base that creates British jobs, but also gives us more sovereignty over our defence capabilities. So all of that in the round is very good news. We'll be the second largest defence investor in NATO, and that's something to be proud of.
If you get there.
Jenny Chapman, is that why the Labour Party can't match this commitment? Because actually, because of your relationship with trade unions, that you could never say, we will cut the civil service, because your trade union allies, funders, whatever you want to call them, they'd go bananas, wouldn't they?
No, I mean, that's got nothing to do with it. What you've got to do when you're looking at our armed forces is you've got to be strategic. And what this government has failed to do is have any kind of strategy for defence. And the reason we've got the smallest army since Napoleon is because they've just whittled away. They've had a recruitment crisis on their hands. They've failed to reach any of their recruitment targets. And I think that you're seeing gradually that erosion. And now you need a fresh government to come in with fresh energy, and new ideas and actually reset this, as you do in many other areas of our state. I mean, look at the health service, look at policing. There are so many things going wrong. No one can point to anything that's better now than it was 14 years ago. That's a hell of a legacy for a government.
We're going to stick with the armed forces for now. Another question, fantastic questions, as ever, from our listeners and viewers. We'd love to know where you're from in the country. Mark says, why is accommodation for illegal immigrants better than accommodation for our armed forces?
Well, it's not. The accommodation right across service families and individual accommodation is very good. 97% is excellent. We're putting £4 billion into improving that, which is not good enough. But
£4 billion is this from the same announcement? Where's the £4 billion?
No, that's long plan, and that's already money that's already been announced and is in the defence budget. I know that from my own constituency in the home of the British Army in Aldershot. Housing is hugely important because of people's lifestyles and the way that they move around in terms of an armed forces career. But we should be proud of the offer, and we should be proud of the fact that we prioritise that as something that's special to an armed forces career, and that's why we're putting our money where our mouth is.
So you're saying it's fit for purpose, family accommodation?
Absolutely.
We hear it isn't.
So 97% is fit for purpose. Clearly, we're judged understandably on that which isn't, and that's why we're paying a huge amount of money. So I know those problems up close because I see that on the garrison in Aldershot. But we should be cognizant of the fact that in the round, and overwhelmingly, the provision is good.
And you would like to get it to 100%, presumably?
Of course, yes, of course, and it's a huge estate, of course, right across the whole country. So that's a constant effort requiring a huge investment. But this is money well spent.
We've moved into the area of immigration there, Jenny Chapman. A question here from Paul: if Labour came to power and stopped the flights to Rwanda, as is your policy, would you put up some migrants in one of your houses? Paul says.
So what we need to do is we need to stop the boats coming. Yeah. But so you've got a choice about how you do that. You can have this Rwanda policy, which is costing £500 million and counting, and already, and absolutely no one's been sent to Rwanda yet, and at best is going to deal with a few hundred, maybe 300 migrants. You had 400 arriving just the other day. You've had thousands over Easter weekend. The idea that this is going to resolve anything is just for the birds. So you've got to so that's one option, what the government's doing. Or you could take that £500 million and you could spend it on enforcement, on a returns unit, on policing, on border force, on making sure that you've got the agreements in place and the enforcement in place to stop the boats coming in the first place.
But the money's spent already. I mean, at what level... Yeah,
tell me about it. I know.
A few hundred, I get that. But if it was like, say, 10,000 are flown by the November election, would you still axe it?
I cannot imagine for 1 second that is going to be the situation. At the moment, you've got... It's costing £2 million per person.
You know what I don't understand about the Labour position? And Tony Blair gave an interview at the weekend, and I thought, that's the right position. So he said this in an interview in the Sunday Times: I've got no problem with Rwanda per se, but I don't think it will stop the votes. But the Labour Party's position is, even if it did, we'd scrap it. That's what I find incoherent, illogical.
OK, if it did, as a major leap of a thought experiment, then we might be having a different conversation. Okay. But there's absolutely no evidence this is going to work. Because we're up against the people traffickers and the people smugglers, and the news flash is they lie to people. They take their money, they put them in boats, they make them risk their lives, they're lying to people, and that is not going to stop because we spend £500 million spending a really small number of people to Rwanda when you've got hundreds of thousands coming.
Annie's sent us a question on the same subject. What is the point, this is a question to you, Leah Doherty, the Armed Forces Minister, what's the point of the Rwanda scheme if it will only take 200 people when 400 people arrived yesterday?
Well, we're going to flow now to Berlin, I'm afraid, ending the PMQs live for questions with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor.
Ich sage das natürlich mit Blick auf den unerbittlichen Angriffskrieg, den Russland seit mehr als 2 Jahren gegen die Ukraine führt. Ein Krieg, der unermessliches Leid erzeugt und unglaubliche Zerstörung. Deutschland und Großbritannien stehen gemeinsam an der Seite der Ukraine. Unser Ziel ist klar: zu unterstützen, dass sich die Ukraine gegen die russische Aggression behaupten
soon
kann.
as the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, is speaking, we're going to take you right back there. But the question that I'd pose to our Armed Forces Minister is this, from Annie. What is the point of the Rwanda scheme if it will only take 200 people when 400 people arrived yesterday?
Well, until we start it, the deterrent will not come into play. So we've got to get it started.
Isn't drowning in the sea quite a big deterrent?
Well, no, I mean, people are continuing to be exploited by people smugglers. We need to break that chain of attraction, and that's why Rwanda is so important. So we've got to get the flights going. That will provide the deterrent. And it's remarkable that Labour say that if they were in power, they would abandon that scheme, because that deterrent would then be removed, and the numbers coming across the channel would increase under a Labour government. I think that's the news today.
Do you think it will stop the boats?
Rubbish.
So the boats will be stopped as soon as that flight's in the air?
I think that's when the deterrent will kick in and numbers will come down.
How many need to take off before they stop?
Well, I think let's wait and see. But I think when it happens, it will have an impact.
We've got half an hour here. Olaf Scholz, German Chancellor, will go straight to Rishi Sunak when he speaks. Quick one for you, though, Jenny Chapman. Why has your boss, Keir Starmer, not looked at the tax advice that Angela Rayner's commissioned about her home sale?
Because he's not a tax lawyer, is he?
He's a lawyer, though.
He is a lawyer.
He's our boss.
That tax advice will contain lots of very personal information. It's her tax advice. She said she's happy to share it with the police, with HMRC. They're the people who should be seeing it.
Have you seen it?
Have I seen her tax advice? Don't be daft. Of course not. I wouldn't ask to see her tax advice. You're going to show me your tax advice?
No, I'm not a politician, thank goodness.
But no, I mean, she will show it to the people who need to see it. They will make a judgment. If she's done anything wrong, she said she will resign. She's very clear that she hasn't done anything wrong. I don't really know what more she can be expected to say.
Should politicians ever call on each other, and it's been done from both sides, on their opponents to publish their tax advice? Is that ever fair game, or should we not even have that debate as part of our political discourse?
I think it can be appropriate. I mean, I think the Nadeem Zahawi situation, where he was shown to owe millions to HMRC, which he claimed was an oversight, I think that was quite an extreme example. This, with Angela, we're talking about something that may or may not have happened over 10 years ago, before she was an MP. The amounts are really small, and she's very happy to share that with the tax authorities. So I'm fairly satisfied with that, and I think most people watching at home...
It's small figures here, You're picking on someone who's pulled herself up by her bootstraps.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I don't think the fact that the sums may be small, that's not really the point. The question is integrity, and she should come clean. And I think there is a case for her showing her tax advice. And also, Keir Starmer, as the leader of the Labour Party, should show a bit of leadership and lead from the front of this, rather than just burying his head in the sand.
There was a joke in there, wasn't it? The Right Honourable Landlady. He used it at the very end, as you were saying, Jane, before the lady herself could respond.
No, I mean, credit where it's due. That's not a bad line for PMQs. I did notice, though, that he said it in reply to question 6, where, of course, Angela Rayner doesn't then get the opportunity to stand up and floor with him like she would have done. You know?
Question from Elizabeth. Why won't either party accept that the housing crisis will not be solved by building more social housing or reforming leaseholds? It's about building housing we need to keep up with the increasing demand, which is being caused by massive population growth, fuelled by immigration. Both parties have failed at building new homes, says Elizabeth. There's too many people, or there's not enough homes for the number of people.
She's right, isn't she?
Well, it's a tremendous challenge, but if you look at the housing numbers since we've been in power, since 2010, the trend is positive. But of course, we need to do more, and I think it's about ensuring that there is that buoyancy in the economy. So principally, it's an economic question of there being that buoyancy in the economy to ensure that that economic energy can be spent on building homes. And clearly, immigration is one factor, but that's immigration is dynamic, and that is another function of the fact that we've got a very buoyant, attractive economy.
You've been saying your policy, isn't it, is build on green belt where you have to. The grey belt, you call it. OK, the grey belt. What is grey belt again?
It's sort of old car parks. There's an old petrol station that's designated green belt. We're saying, come on, that could be a really good place for housing, so we're calling that grey belt. But, I mean, we do need to get building more houses. We have to do that. The average age now of someone buying their first house is like mid to late 30s.
Do you think is there a moral duty on people not to fight new homes, do you think? I mean, lots of people who have homes sit back, I'm happy, but what about these poor kids who can't get on the ladder?
I wouldn't call it a moral duty. I think it's fair that people have a say in what is built in their community. And, you know, it's not right to have a free-for-all. The Labour Party doesn't want that. What we want is to have a proper, planned-out programme of building so that people can get on the housing ladder and start putting down roots and building those communities.
I think it would have been sensible if Keir Starmer would have said that at Labour Party conference and put it in those terms. But we are going to Berlin now, where our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is speaking.
Pandemic, I was on the phone a lot with you, and I hugely valued your advice as I designed our furlough scheme, which took in some part inspiration from your Kurzarbeit policy that you had instituted previously. And I also remember we bonded over the UK's most famous export to your adopted hometown of Hamburg, which was, of course, the Beatles. And when His Majesty the King was here last year on his first state visit as monarch, he spoke in the Bundestag of renewing the special bond of friendship between our countries. And our partnership is, I believe, a perfect symbol of that. And at this dangerous moment, the bond between our two nations is stronger than ever. We meet as a war rages on our continent and new threats are rising around the world. And Olaf, I want to congratulate you on your leadership in recognising the Zeitenwende and you taking the historic decision to increase Germany's defence spending. And we stand here today together as the leading defence spenders in Europe, unshakable NATO allies and the two largest military supporters of Ukraine in Europe. And together we will continue to provide unwavering support for our Ukrainian friends, as you said, for as long as it takes. And we look forward to the Ukrainian Recovery Conference being hosted here in Berlin in June. And I know we'll continue to work closely together on other global challenges, including putting the Middle East on a better path. And together we have acted to meet this moment. We've taken greater responsibility for our collective security, and today we're going even further, opening a new chapter in the security relationship between our two nations, as you heard from Chancellor Scholz. We've committed to delivering a new framework for our cooperation on defence, and we're delivering an immediate expansion of our industrial cooperation, announcing a joint endeavour to procure the Boxer artillery system, providing our soldiers with a new cutting-edge capability and supporting hundreds of German and British jobs. Because, let's be clear, this is a partnership that connects with all aspects of our economy and our society. And you and I discussed our cooperation in many other areas today, from technology and AI to irregular migration to trade and investment. And I'm delighted to say that we've also secured around £8 billion of new investment in Britain, including into our energy sector. So I very much look forward to deepening our discussions in the coming months and weeks through the G7 and the NATO summits, the European political community, and maybe when our two football teams meet at Euro 2024. Because for all our shared values and our shared determination to meet the challenges of this new era, the thing that really unites us, as you said, is our people, Olaf. The love that Liverpool has for Jurgen Klopp, or that Munich has for Harry Kane. It's a reminder of the special bond of friendship that His Majesty has described. So as close allies, partners and friends, we will continue to stand side by side to preserve security and prosperity in the UK, Germany and across this continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chancellor, may I ask you, are you 100%?
So we have PM Rishi Sunak and Olaf Scholz talking about the warm relations between these two big countries, still big countries in the world economy. Olaf Scholz talking about Jurgen Klopp and also Rishi Sunak saying the same. There's lots of shared interest in the two countries.
Yes, and making a nice little joke about when England plays Germany in the Euros, when presumably that relationship will be a little more tense. But some people say that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak hasn't spent enough time on the international stage. When it was Tony Blair, people used to say that he spent too much time on the international stage.
Yeah.
And...
Well, we have here, I think, Mr Sunak, he's taking back some control over the UK's kind of PR job overseas. He's outsourced it to David Cameron as the ex-Prime Minister in the past few months, making him Foreign Minister, of course. His last trip overseas was to the COP climate conference.
You can go back in to listen to our Prime Minister.
Rightly, with a reduction in civil service headcount back to 2019 levels. Since then, we've seen a very significant rise that isn't sustainable or needed. The Chancellor has conducted a detailed exercise. He announced this at the end of last year. That exercise is completed, and that's what gives us the confidence that we can release the savings needed to fund our defence plan, combined with an uplift in R&D spending, which we had already budgeted for, is already included in our plans. But you're right, we are making a choice to prioritise defence with both of those decisions, and I believe that's the right thing to do, because whether we like it or not, the world is, I think, more dangerous than it's been at any moment since the Cold War, and it falls on leaders, whether that's Olaf, whether that's me, to do what's necessary to keep our countries and our continent safe and to stand up for our values. That's what Britain has always done, and that's what we are doing today. That's why I announced what I did yesterday. It is the biggest strengthening of our national defence in a generation. It is fully funded, and it is based on the fact that we have a strong economy and an economic plan that is working. And you can see that when I came into this office and inflation was at 11%, it's now 3% and falling, energy bills coming down, interest rates to follow, growth returning, and it's because our economic plan is working that I'm able to make these announcements, and they are entirely consistent with our ability to keep cutting people's taxes. You know, just in the past few weeks, the second of our tax cuts kicked in. That's a £900 tax cut for someone on average earnings, together with the state pension going up £900 on our tax cuts to support business investment. But you do need to have a clear and credible economic plan in order to make these announcements. We do. That plan is working, and that's why I was able to announce what I did. I mean, Olaf will answer your question on the US. I think the only thing I'd point out before he does is, I think Olaf would agree with me, you know, US presidents, as you've heard from the Secretary General yesterday, have always called for more European defence spending. That's not new. And I think that is entirely reasonable. You know, Olaf addressed it in his remarks. You know, we can't expect Americans to pay any price, to take any burden, if we in Europe are not ourselves prepared to make those sacrifices and make those investments. And that's exactly what we are doing. I think Olaf, I talked about the Zeitenwende and the leadership he's shown. You've seen my announcement yesterday. I said we've historically been one of the people that's always met our 2% commitment. But it's important that we in Europe demonstrate that we are doing that in order, I think, to keep the US committed to NATO, and the weekend news was very welcome. Olaf.
Ja, schönen Dank für Ihre Frage. Ich weiß, warum Sie gefragt haben, denn die Beziehung zwischen den USA und Deutschland, die Beziehung zwischen den USA und den europäischen NATO-Staaten und auch Europa insgesamt sind exzellent. Das hat was zu tun mit der Leadership von Präsident Biden, die wirklich außerordentlich ist und der sich sehr intensiv und aktiv bemüht um eine gute Entwicklung.
So, our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak referring to that big defence spending announcement today, but actually lots of you have been getting in touch with us today about that announcement, and there seems to be a great deal of mistrust that anything will get better from our viewers when it comes to defence spending.
That's right. The government's repeatedly promising more money and not delivering, and we heard from Jenny Chapman, and she was saying very clearly, we will, as a Labour Party, do our best to get there, but only after a spending review in the first year of the next Parliament, if Labour win the election. That means that we will have a clear dividing line in the election, Gloria, doesn't it, between Tories saying, here's what we'll do, Labour's saying, we can't promise it yet.
Yes, and I guess when politicians make announcements, people would think, well, that would sort of happen straight away. But, of course, the funding for this announcement is dependent on cutting back on civil service jobs. Now, how long does that process take? So the idea that you make an announcement and the spending taps are turned on is not accurate, which goes to your point, that is made an election issue.
It's very hard to cut civil service jobs. We heard there from the Prime Minister in Berlin saying that this is the biggest spending in a generation on defence. He clearly, I think it's good politics, frankly, for him personally. I think it sorts out the difficult backbenches ahead of difficult local elections, and I think it also puts a dividing line with Labour.
But does it move the dial? Does it move the dial? And actually, those local elections, which are next Thursday now, aren't they? But we're not going to get the results of those local elections to later than that. But yeah, goodness only knows what happens after that and whether announcements like this will calm.
OK, we're going to hand over now to our colleagues Tom and Emily on Good Afternoon Britain. Tom and Emily, are you there?
We are indeed. Christopher, thank you. And what an interesting press conference that was. I noticed the Prime Minister there standing in front of an EU flag. I haven't seen a press conference before where the EU member state has a non-EU member state with also a EU flag on both of them. I just found that was curious. But we're going to be talking to Jonathan Gullis, the Tory MP, who asked an extraordinarily long Prime Minister's question. We're going to get his take on...
He gave Robert Peston a run for his money, didn't he?
Absolutely did.
He did. Kept going and going and going. But there you go.
Absolutely. We're also going to be debating two-tier policing after various protests seem to have varying degrees of severity.
Yes, of course, this came after the St George's Day rallies yesterday in central London. We're asking the question also about pro-Palestine protests too. Stay with us. It's going to be a fantastic show with you until 3 o'clock. But first, your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A fine spring day for most of us today. Dry, sunny spells, the odd shower here and there, most likely across southern parts of the country. We've got higher pressure to the northwest. That's where the sunniest skies will be across much of Scotland, into Northern Ireland, northwest England, North Wales as well. Elsewhere, a cloud building and yeah, South Wales, southwest England, East Anglia could see the odd shower, but these will be few and far between. For the vast majority, is a dry afternoon. And in the sunshine and with light winds towards the northwest, although temperatures aren't going to be very exciting, it's going to feel fairly pleasant. Still this cool breeze down the North Sea coast, 9 or 10 Celsius. On the cool side for the time of year. Into the evening, the cloud will tend to thin and break in places, but there'll be further showers coming into the northeast for a time, and then some cloud development and some showers into parts of Wales, western England as well. With the cloud, temperatures will stay up at 4 or 5 Celsius, but where we do see some clear spells, well, it's going to be a frosty start on Thursday, especially for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. A chill in the air first thing, but plenty of sunshine here, and actually it stays largely dry towards the northwest once again, whilst I think a cloudier day is expected elsewhere, particularly into the afternoon where there'll be some showers for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. Highs of 13 or 14 Celsius.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Many of the people that you had invited to come and speak were people who've been elected in their own countries. I'm thinking of people like Suella Braverman. I'm thinking of Nigel Farage, who has been a member of the European Parliament, of course, had an enormous impact on British politics. And Viktor Orban, who has been elected and re-elected. Many people may not care for the Prime Minister of Hungary, but he's certainly an elected person.
And in addition, we had about 15 to 16 members of the European Parliament who were also elected, and they really live in Brussels. And you would imagine that Brussels, being the head of the capital of the EU, would allow elected members of its own parliament to have an opportunity to voice their views. So I think what was very interesting about this is that the mayors overplayed their hands, so that because they overplayed their hands, all public opinion became entirely on our side. It was so evident, so transparent, that this was really an attempt to use the police instead of arguments to react to our conference, that it was a real direct threat, and it is still a direct threat to the freedom of assembly and to free speech.
So how do you think it leaves it? Is it more likely or less likely that there'll be future bans?
I think this is a trial run. What I'm really worried about is that if the future of democracy and free speech depends on the ruling of one judge, and you have to remember that 3 other judges ruled against us, then democracy is in big trouble. What worries me absolutely is that a strong body of political opinion amongst established politicians believes that it is okay to cancel conferences and to crush the people's opinions and prevent the freedom of assembly. Democracy actually depends on these foundational values.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 24th of April.
It is indeed now a Prime Minister abroad as he faces some struggles at home. While Rishi Sunak says the UK and Germany will continue to provide unwavering support for Ukraine, he's under fire from the Labour Party over small boats and a divided party.
After the violent clashes that broke out in Whitehall yesterday, some say the Metropolitan Police is guilty of two-tier policing, coming down hard on St George's Day events whilst being soft on pro-Palestinian protests. Well, we'll be debating that this hour.
And horses, one covered in blood, rampaged through central London, smashing into traffic. Was this a household cavalry exercise which went horribly wrong? We'll have the details.
And it is so nice to see you back, Emily. Have you had a wonderful holiday?
I have had a wonderful holiday, and in true British style, I've come back with a bit of a sunburn rather than a suntan. I roasted myself right up until the end of the holiday before I got onto the transfer to the airport. So there you go. I made the most of it, but I'm feeling a bit of pain.
OK, well, but at least refreshed, relaxed, ready to take on what is going to be quite a busy week. We've got now, what is it, a week and a half until the local elections. Politics is hotting up, and just as you think things couldn't get any weirder, this morning we had a horse rampage through central London. You know, I've seen people saying perhaps this is an omen. I hope not, because it certainly wouldn't be a good one, would it? No, I don't think. I think it was more than 4 horses, though. It was 5. So it wasn't quite the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I think at least we can rest easy in our beds about that. But what dramatic images. Anyway, we will be talking to Jonathan Gullis, the Conservative Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent. He asked the first Prime Minister's question today in this deputy session of Prime Minister's Questions. We'll be asking him on his thoughts of the Rwanda legislation finally passing on Monday. What might it mean? Yes, and we'll ask him why on earth he took so long to ask a simple question. But there you go. Perhaps that's his right to do so. Send us your views. Yes, gbnews.com/your say. But let's get your news headlines with Sophia.
Emily, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 1. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The Deputy Prime Minister took aim at Labour for failing to back the government's increased spending on defence. Standing for Rishi Sunak, who's in Germany, Oliver Dowden began today's PMQs with a joke aimed at the Labour deputy's tax affairs, suggesting she might claim the House of Commons as her main residence. On the matter of defence, however, Mr Dowden said Labour had been silent on whether it backs investment in the armed forces.
in an increasingly dangerous world, the Prime Minister was able to announce his plan for the biggest strengthening of defence spending in a generation. But it should come as no surprise that the party opposite refused to say whether they back it or not, because this comes from the Right Honourable Lady who voted to scrap Trident and install in Downing Street someone who wanted to change the army into a Peace Corps. There you have it.
Angela Rayner hit back, though, saying that Mr Dowden had been obsessing over her living arrangements while the government quietly cuts funds for the army.
The difference is that we haven't cut the army to its smallest size since Napoleon. And Mr Speaker, I read with interest that the Right Honourable Gentleman has been urging his neighbour in number 10 to call an election because he's worried they might get wiped out. Has he finally realised that when he stabbed Boris Johnson in the back to get his mate into number 10, he was ditching their biggest election winner for a pint-sized loser?
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says Britain will continue offering what he called unwavering support for Ukraine as he appeared moments ago next to his German counterpart.
We meet as a war rages on our continent and new threats are rising around the world. And Olaf, I want to congratulate you on your leadership in recognising the Zeitenwende and you taking the historic decision to increase Germany's defence spending. And we stand here today together as the leading defence spenders in Europe, unshakable NATO allies and the two largest military supporters of Ukraine in Europe. And together we will continue to provide unwavering support for our Ukrainian friends, as you said, for as long as it takes.
Meanwhile, in the US, the Senate voted overwhelmingly to pass a long-awaited aid package for Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan. It's expected to be quickly signed by President Biden, ending months of uncertainty over whether the United States would continue supporting Kyiv. It comes after the bill passed the House of Representatives on Saturday in a show of bipartisan support despite considerable resistance among some Republicans. Ukraine's President Zelensky says it reinforces the US as a beacon of democracy. The mother of one of the Nottingham attack victims has written an open letter to police after graphic messages were shared in a WhatsApp group. Barnaby Webber, who was 19, was stabbed and killed, along with two others, by 32-year-old Valdo Kalokani. In an open letter, Barnaby's mother, Emma, says her son was described as properly butchered, among other phrases, and has urged police to show the respect that was not given to her son. She says she chose to publish the letter in the Times newspaper after requests to address the officers directly were denied. Several military horses on the loose in central London this morning have now been contained. Video posted to social media appeared to show one of the animals covered in blood. At least 4 people were reportedly injured as the animals galloped their way through the busy city streets. Westminster Police say they'll now be transported for care. The former leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, has been released on bail. Northern Ireland's longest-serving MP was suspended from the DUP following his arrest last month for what's been described as historical sex charges, including 1 count of rape. His wife has also been charged with aiding and abetting in relation to the same investigation. In his resignation letter, he said he would be strenuously contesting the allegations. And a 20-mile speed limit on residential roads across Wales could be scrapped by the end of the year. A record-breaking petition opposing the speed restrictions has received almost 500,000 signatures. The Welsh Government warns that reverting back to 30 miles an hour speed limits could cost up to £5 million. Ministers are urging people to have their say on the policy, which could see councils given powers to return limits to where they were. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Thanks, Sophia. Now, good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 1, and we're on GB News.
Yes, we're going to start this hour with a little bit on Rishi Sunak's visit to Berlin. He's announcing more security cooperation with Germany.
Yes, it follows yesterday's announcement of a huge increase in UK defence spending, up to 2.5% of GDP. The Prime Minister said the UK and Germany will provide unwavering support to Ukraine and urged other European countries to stand up to Russian aggression.
Well, joining us now is our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, now I understand there's been quite a lot of interest in how Rishi Sunak is going to fund this increase in defence spending. Will it become from enormous cuts to the civil service, or indeed can he afford tax cuts at the same time as increasing this?
Well, that's right, Tom, and hi, Emily. Welcome back from your holiday. Yeah, there's a bit of cakeism going on here. Having their cake and eat it is the old Boris Johnson expression, in the sense that Rishi Sunak is saying that he can increase defence spending and cut taxes. Now, that's a position which Labour may dispute, but Rishi Sunak is trying to make clear that there's a choice to be taken here between the Tory version of cutting the civil service to spend more money on defence, and Labour won't commit to that. So we are seeing a bit of politics here from Rishi Sunak on the world stage. He's making very clear why he thinks that his plan to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP is funded. He says it can be paid for from cuts to the civil service. Labour, correspondingly, look a bit flat-footed. They're saying that we're going to wait until we can look at the numbers ourselves in a spending review in the first year of a Labour government and then decide to get there. It's an ambition, as it was for Boris Johnson back in 2022. But the PM's gone further. He's saying we can get there, and this is how we do it. I think that's quite interesting and quite political. And if the timing for him is important, I think, coming ahead of what could be difficult local elections next week, mayoral election results on Saturday, of course. And he's saying to his backbenchers, look, I can do politics, I can make Labour. It may have to make a difficult choice on whether to cut spending and pay for more defence spending.
Chris, you mentioned 2022. Of course, you were in Madrid with Boris Johnson when he made that announcement. It seems like there's been a hokey-cokey on this 2.5 defence spending target. Boris Johnson was for it, Liz Truss was for it, Rishi Sunak initially refused to then continue that commitment, but now we're back for it again. You'd forgive the electorate for being a bit confused about all of this.
Yeah, of course, Tom. But I think times have changed even since 2022, and the threat from China, Iran and Russia, this axis of adversity which the PM talked about. I mean, he's in terms, as he saw in the speech yesterday, putting Britain on a war footing. The peace dividend we've all enjoyed since the end of the Cold War in the early 90s is nearly over, if not over already, as countries gear up to try and face each other. It's alarming, but I think he's reacting to where we are at the moment. Of course, Grant Shapps telling the Daily Mail just last month he wants 3% of GDP on defence. James Heappey, of course, he's saying the same thing. But both those two, James Heappey, of course, the former Armed Forces Minister, they both seem happy with 2.5%. And as things stand, Labour haven't got an answer. So we are seeing the guardrails, the lines opening up between Labour and Tories on defence. I don't think they all come together. I think Labour are clear they will commit to spending after the election. The Tories are saying before, it is now an election issue.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you very much, Christopher Hope, our political editor. And also congratulations on the marathon. I haven't seen you since you completed that feat. Good stuff. Lots of money raised.
Thanks.
Anyway, shall we speak to the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Jonathan Gullis MP? Jonathan, we've got to start with the elephant in the room. That extraordinarily long question in Prime Minister's question. What was all that about? You lost me halfway through, I must say.
Well, Emily, sadly, I was being heckled so loudly by the Labour Party, clearly living rent-free in their head, something Angela Rayner, I'm sure, would dream of. In order to actually get heard, the Speaker had to calm the other side down. But the key thing, Emily, is that whilst Labour want to shout down Stoke-on-Trent, they don't want to hear the facts of their disastrous record locally. I'm proud to be standing up for the people in the town of Tunstall, which has got the town hall back open, more CCTV to keep the streets safe, and making sure that the law's been changed to take on road grabs and landlords. And now it's the council that needs to do their bit.
Well, there were some political stenographers who were guessing that it could have been the longest opening Prime Minister's question in the history of modern Prime Minister's questions. But we should get on to the substance now, Jonathan, because, of course, on Monday we saw the Rwanda bill passed. After 2 years since it was first introduced, since that first agreement was announced, it's not a good look for the government that it's taken 2 long years for this piece of legislation to make its way through conception to actuality.
Well, I think you'll appreciate, Tom, that when this was first brought about by Priti Patel, the then Home Secretary, in this world-leading deal that many countries are looking to replicate, let's be perfectly clear, we've heard that from mainland European nations as well, that we didn't anticipate maybe just how many lefty lawyers and do-gooders and the Labour Party were going to continuously stand in the way, despite this being a very important priority of the great British public. Obviously, we've listened to judgments from the Supreme Court and reacted and responded, which this piece of legislation specifically does deal with. And therefore, I feel confident now that we've got the operational side of things ready to go, which I know that Dame Priti Patel's been working, I believe, with the Prime Minister to make sure is all good to go. So we have this one-stop shop rather than endless legal challenges and the merry-go-round that has existed before. The Prime Minister said the planes have been chartered, the airfield is secured, the accommodation is ready in Rwanda, and now we need to make sure on that 10 to 12-week deadline we deliver those flights, not just one, not just two, but continuous flights to make sure we have that effective deterrent alongside the deal with France that stopped 23,000 vessels deporting their shores last year, and other returns agreements with countries like Albania.
Jonathan, lots about Priti Patel. She's not in the Home Office anymore, is she? So what sway does she hold on all this?
Well, I think the fact that Priti herself did the deal with the Rwandan government was something that was quite extraordinary. I don't think many people would be able to have got such a deal over the line. Let's not forget that Rwanda indeed does have a dark past, but if you look at their current trajectory, I think 7 to 8% annual economic growth. They've actually taken 130,000 refugees settled in their country via the UN themselves.
So how many are we going to
opposing us using it?
Jonathan, realistically, how many are we going to actually send to Rwanda? I mean, we've been talking about accommodation on this channel, the challenges there. We've been talking about the potential loopholes there are in this legislation that could allow lawyers to stop people from being deported. Doesn't seem to be an idea of actually how many. I mean, tens of thousands crossing per year. Are tens of thousands going to go to Rwanda?
Well, let's remember, Emily, that in recent times, the Rwandan government themselves, I think literally only a matter of a month ago, said that there is no cap on this scheme. Yes, there is an initial number of around 200 to 500 whilst the scheme gets up and running, essentially the testing of the waters, but there is no cap, and therefore we will be able to have continuous flights going with no cap or limit on how many will be able to go there. And I do hope to see thousands of people being deported, and the sooner that we see that, the less likely those people are to go and give thousands of pounds into the hands of smuggling gangs who are profiteering off human life. Only this week, tragically, people dying in the English Channel because they are being taken advantage of by these ruthless criminal gangs. And by having this deterrent, we will be able to break apart the smuggling gangs' operational model, which is exactly what we want to see happen.
Now, Jonathan, I can't let you go without asking this one quick final question. Lots of news about Priti Patel, lots of op-eds, lots of conversations, perhaps, in the corridors of power. Is she preparing for a leadership pitch, perhaps after an unsuccessful election? And are you on her campaign team?
Well, Tom, first of all, I have absolutely no idea whatsoever. All I know is that Priti Patel was the architect of this scheme. I think it's good to have her voice alongside many other Conservative voices in supporting the Rwanda scheme and making sure that we get it to work. Because, as I say, this is a top 3 issue, particularly in red wall seats across the country, when it comes to what they want to see the government doing. And Stoke-on-Trent has been impacted by illegal migration, having been the 5th largest contributor to the asylum dispersal scheme. But Tom, my focus is solely on getting re-elected as the Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork. That in itself is a full-time job, and that's what I'll continue to be doing.
Well, Jonathan Gullis, thank you very much for joining us and talking through those issues and even that little bit of rumour.
Yes, I mean, Priti Patel is rather popular with the Tory party members.
Yes, the faithful.
Yes, good at campaigning.
But let's cross across to Berlin now, because our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, is there for us. Now, Catherine, you've been travelling with the Prime Minister, you've been talking to the Prime Minister. What have we learnt on this 2-day trip around Europe?
Well, frankly, that the United Kingdom is going to prioritise defence spending, a big boost to it, up to 2.5% by the end of the decade. Rishi Sunak has told us that he's made a choice. Now he's been quizzed on how it's all going to be paid for. Now the government's saying they're going to cut 70,000 civil service jobs to take those numbers in the civil service back to pre-pandemic levels, but bodies like the Institute for Fiscal Studies, etc., are saying that there's likely to be quite deep cuts to public services. The Prime Minister will not be drawn on that, but he's here today in Berlin and yesterday in Poland, sending a message saying that he thinks we stand at an inflection point, that the world is the most dangerous it's been since the end of the Cold War. And he said today, we will do whatever it takes to keep our country safe. Now, yesterday, standing in Warsaw side by side with the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, today with the German Chancellor, praising the decision of Germany to really ramp up defence spending, because we know, don't we, although the UK has always paid a minimum of 2%, which is supposed to be the absolute least that a NATO member pays, only 11 members actually do currently contribute that or more towards their defence spending. Germany, for a very long time, lagged hugely behind. But Chancellor Scholz has made the decision since the invasion of Ukraine, of course, to massively ramp up spending. So that's something that Rishi Sunak is welcoming. So sending a message basically that Europe has to stand together and put the money in, reinforcing the message that the United States can't be relied on to sort of carry the burden of this alone. So he feels it's a choice he's had to make. He's quite upbeat, I would say, both yesterday and today, talking to him on the plane. He's got a bit of a boost, I feel. This is important to him. And of course, we had the Rwanda bill pass through Parliament the other day, the welfare bill at the end of last week. Lots of policies coming out now, and of course, just over a week till the local elections.
Yeah, the clock is ticking. Well, Catherine Forster, thank you for joining us there live from Berlin.
Excellent stuff. Now, in other news, just over 400 migrants crossed the English Channel yesterday. That's according to new Home Office figures. And this came on the same day that 5 migrants died after drowning in French waters.
Although there is some confusion about precisely how some of these migrants died. Let's get the information now with GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. Mark, firstly, let's talk about the numbers, but I do want to follow up on some of the confusing reporting about drownings versus tramplings. It's all a bit murky, but the numbers first.
Yes, in terms of the numbers, it's more than actually we were reporting yesterday. And remarkable, really, that given 5 people had drowned in this tragedy off the French coast, the migrants kept on coming, including 58 people on board the boat that was involved in that tragedy that were determined, it seems, to ignore the French, who offered to take them back to France, we understand. And instead, as you can see from the exclusive pictures on screen there, that boat is out in the channel being shadowed by this French patrol boat as it made its way slowly towards UK waters, where it was picked up by the Dover lifeboat. So 402 people in total made it to UK waters and were then taken to Dover yesterday in 7 small boats. So a very significant number, takes the total who've come across the channel this year to 6,667 compared to about 5,500 for the same period last year. So significantly up on last year's total. And, of course, coming just hours after that key Rwanda bill finally passed in Parliament. No deterrent as yet, but, of course, no planes have yet got off the ground heading for Rwanda.
Mark, sorry to break into you here, but there is some breaking news from Wales you can bring us.
Yes, a serious incident that's unfolding at a school in Carmarthenshire. This school is Ysgol Dyffryn Achman, which is in Ammanford in Carmarthenshire. The school, we understand, is on lockdown. There are air ambulances, police and other paramedic vehicles in attendance. We are told by a number of eyewitnesses that a teacher may have been stabbed in this incident, not confirmed by Dyfed-Powys Police at the moment, but they certainly have confirmed that a significant incident is underway, that they have resources there, that there are air ambulances and other medical personnel on scene. Worried parents at that school have been posting on social media and talking to members of the media as well about the situation. They are saying that they had heard that a teacher had been stabbed but have no more detail than that. They are very concerned, clearly, the fact that the school, as of 15-20 minutes ago, was still on lockdown with many policing resources at the scene. So a significant incident unfolding at this school in Ammanford.
Gosh, well, thank you for bringing us that breaking news, and please do bring us any updates when and if you hear them. Thank you very much. Mark White, our Home and Security Editor.
Really concerning stuff.
Very disturbing.
Well, we'll keep across that story and more still to come. We're debating whether the Met is guilty of two-tier policing after violence broke out at a St George's Day event. Some say the level of policing doesn't happen for some other protests, including pro-Palestinian ones. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
And I did want to give you a platform, but I also want to give you an opportunity to apologise to anyone that you might hurt, and also give a message now to people who might want to copy some of the things that you've done, because people have copied it. So was there anything you'd like to say about that?
So the first thing you addressed, yeah, I do want to say sorry, because I did say sorry in the BBC interview, and that's the only thing they put out as a clip. So I don't know why they tried to do that, but I'll say it again on GB News here. I apologise to all the victims in the past that I've may have caused distress to, may have harassed, may have mentally tormented in any type of way. I apologise to them because I didn't mean to do that, and I was just having fun at the moment, but I didn't realise that it would have negative repercussions and negative effects on their psychological, way of thinking. So I apologise for that. And also, the one thing I have to say to young people is social media isn't real. What I've portrayed to the guys on the internet is that I'm this cool, I don't give a toss about anything. But me as a person, I really do care. And for people I don't really read comments on the internet, because if I was to do that, I would probably go into a depressive state. All I can say to you guys is believe in yourself, and there's bigger things you can do out there than just being an absolute menace on the internet or being antisocial. If you have ambitions, I like to read, I like music. I want to go deeper into my passion so I understand me as a person and not what other people think I am.
You are an articulate young man. You are obviously intelligent as well when you talk like this. And I really hope, for your sake and for the sake of a lot of people who did take a negative influence from what you did initially, that you really don't go back down that route.
I have a child as well, and I have to be there, not just for me, but for my child, for my child's mother, for my mother. I have to be there for a lot of people. It's not just me. So I need to put in the work.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 27 minutes past 1. Now, at least 6 people were arrested at a St George's Day event held in Whitehall yesterday.
Yes, the Metropolitan Police shared a number of videos on social media of people sporting the English flag, pushing past areas cordoned off by police. There you go, on our screens right now.
Mounted officers then intervened with horses to restore the cordon that had been established.
But with the increase of pro-Palestine protests in the capital, some are questioning whether this particular form of policing is an example of so-called two-tier policing.
Well, the director of the Law and Order Foundation, Norman Brennan, says that there isn't two-tier policing, while the managing director of the Public Safety Foundation, Oliver Lawrence, says that there is. Well, Oliver, thanks for joining us. You have the case to make here. Why do you think there is two-tier policing going on in the capital?
Well, I think the problem is, Tom and Emily, thanks very much indeed for having me, is the fact that for a number of years now, since, the Met has been in crisis for quite some time now, and the thing you need in a crisis to get yourself out of it ever since the Katie report dropped is effective police communications. The Met doesn't have that. And ultimately what is happening is the public has no understanding or perception as to why the Met is making the decisions it's making to police two different events quite apparently quite differently. And until such time as they come out and describe and provide some context around some of the policing decisions they make, naturally the public will form an opinion as to how this is going to affect and how they're carrying out their operational duties. Because when you watch it on a camera, when you see the results, when you see what happens on a weekend, we deal with a lot of the Palestinian protesters after the fact. Yesterday, we felt the need to deal with sort of far-right patriots at the time and quite aggressively. You can see a visual representation which is quite dramatically different. And I think the public have every right to question why that is, but they don't seem to get any answers.
Well, Norman, I can't help but get the impression that the police are more comfortable getting tough with the types of people we saw yesterday at the St George's parade there, the celebrations. They're used to that type of policing. Perhaps you can compare it to some policing of football matches and the like. When it comes to pro-Palestinian protests or actively political ones which involve foreign conflicts, they get a little bit worried and they get a little bit softly with their approach.
Well, look, I don't disagree with much of what Oliver has said. He's absolutely right. I see what he says, you see what I see, and so do the public and people on social media. I'd say it's more akin to careful policing. And the reason I say that is that at every single demonstration, it appears that people's anger, hatred, belligerence, division and revenge is aimed at policing. Now, policing are overseen in London by what is called Gold Command. That will be an assistant commissioner or deputy assistant commissioner up at the yard. Now, where the police, where I say instead of two-tier policing is careful policing, is pretty much like the Black Lives Matter when they came to town during COVID. Now, I personally thought they should have been far more robust. However, I do actually see that there were elements within the Black Lives Matter that wanted to push the police to the limit, so much so it would give them an excuse for all-out public disorder. And this is what the police have to balance themselves against, the Palestinian marches, for example. I personally think they should be banned. I'm sick of it. The public are sick of it. The victims are sick of it because they don't get the police that are policing these events. But what the police do are caught between a rock and a hard place. They can't win. And the abuse and the baiting is always directed at frontline police officers that sometimes don't know the law as well as people like Oliver and I do, old sweats. So sometimes try and make it up on the moment. And I'm telling you now, that the police are leaving in thousands. Out of the 20,000 newly recruited police officers, almost 5,000 have already resigned. And serving officers, the ones that are on these streets, are phoning me and saying, Norman, I've had enough. I'm throwing him a ticket. I can't police like I want to do. The public blame me, whatever I do. And for that, I'm off. Now, one day when you haven't got a police service, Who is it that's going to police the streets? Who is it that the public and those that aim their anger and hatred?
Norman,
Where are you
let's
going
just
to aim
get
it?
a word from Oliver here on that point. Is it not the fault of the police here? The police have stuck between a rock and a hard place. Is this actually the fault of politicians?
To be honest with you, yes, I suppose we've got to look at the funding issues and the lack of police resources. And I think that's one of the biggest contextual items that the public aren't probably aware of. You know, we see significant numbers of people coming into London on a Saturday in comparison to the numbers that we saw yesterday of the St George Patriots, if we want to call them that, in terms of how the police could deal with that. But that's not communicated out to the public. And this two-tier policing analogy grows strength every day. You know, the National Police Chiefs Council, Sir Mark Rowley, it would appear they've got their heads buried in the sand in terms of wanting to tackle this issue and being more transparent with the way that they go about their policing operations. And ultimately, that lack of communication only affects one group of people, and that's frontline cops who are out there day in and day out trying to keep Londoners safe, because the lack of communication coming from senior management.
I wonder if they're making a mistake by trying to be so transparent on social media, inviting this constant feedback from all quarters, from activists, and you don't get a rounded view of things on social media, of course. But thank you very much. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for on that. We'll speak again soon, I'm sure. Oliver Lawrence, Director of the Public Safety Foundation, and Norman Brennan of the Law and Order Foundation.
No, very interesting stuff.
Lots to say on that. Let's come back.
Absolutely.
Let's come back.
Let's revisit that issue. But still to come, more on that disruption in central London earlier, where a number of horses rampaged through the capital, colliding with traffic, one strewn with blood. But first, the news with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Tom. It's 1:33. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. We start with some breaking news. There are reports coming out of southwest Wales of a stabbing at a secondary school. Police say one person has been arrested after 3 people were injured in an incident at Armand Valley School. The school is now in lockdown amid reports that a teacher is one of those who've been injured. Parents are reporting a large police presence in the area with 2 helicopters at the scene. This is a developing story. We will bring you more as we get it. To other news, the Deputy Prime Minister took aim at Labour for failing to back the government's increased spend on defence. Standing in for Rishi Sunak, who's in Germany, Oliver Dowden said Labour had been silent on whether it backs investment in the armed forces. Angela Rayner hit back, though, saying that Mr Dowden had been obsessing over her living arrangements while the government quietly cuts funds for the army.
The difference is that we haven't cut the army to its smallest size since Napoleon. And Mr Speaker, I read with interest that the Right Honourable Gentleman has been urging his neighbour in number 10 to call an election because he's worried they might get wiped out. Has he finally realised that when he stabbed Boris Johnson in the back to get his mate into number 10, he was ditching their biggest election winner for a pint-sized loser?
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says Britain will continue offering what he called unwavering support for Ukraine as he appeared moments ago next to his German counterpart. It comes after Rishi Sunak committed to spending 2.5% of GDP on defence by 2030, which he says all NATO allies should match. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2434 and €1.1636. The price of gold is £1,860 and 58 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,088 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A fine spring day for most of us today. Dry, sunny spells, the odd shower here and there, most likely across southern parts of the country. We've got higher pressure to the northwest That's where the sunniest skies will be across much of Scotland, into Northern Ireland, northwest England, North Wales as well. Elsewhere, a cloud building, and yeah, South Wales, southwest England, East Anglia could see the odd shower, but these will be few and far between. For the vast majority, is a dry afternoon. And in the sunshine and with light winds towards the northwest, although temperatures aren't going to be very exciting, it's going to feel fairly pleasant. Still this cool breeze down the North Sea coast, 9 or 10 Celsius, on the cool side for the time of year. Into the evening, the cloud will tend to thin and break in places, but there'll be further showers coming into the northeast for a time, and then some cloud development and some showers into parts of Wales, western England as well. With the cloud, temperatures will stay up at 4 or 5 Celsius, but where we do see some clear spells, well, it's going to be a frosty start on Thursday, especially for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. A chill in the air first thing, but plenty of sunshine here, and actually it stays largely dry towards the northwest once again, whilst I think a cloudier day is expected elsewhere, particularly into the afternoon, where there'll be some showers for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. Highs of 13 or 14 Celsius.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to North Yorkshire. Firstly, the southbound A1M. Now it's still closed from Boroughbridge at junction 48 down towards Allerton Park. At junction 47, queuing back towards the Dishforth interchange for investigation work. Routes through Harrogate and Knaresborough also queuing, as is the A19 towards York as a result. Northamptonshire, the westbound A14, junction 1 Welford through towards the M1 at 19. The Catthorpe interchange is queuing. It's partially blocked whilst a collision there is being dealt with. Milton Keynes, Monks Way westbound, the A422 from Alston Drive to the Abbey Hill roundabout, the A5 blocked and queuing. That's due to a collision. And in London, the Upper Richmond Road in East Sheen remains shut between Milton Road and Waitrose, and long queues at the scene there of a serious collision. And that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 1:39. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now we have some breaking news to bring you. 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally as part of an investigation into the deaths of 5 people, including a child who died while trying to cross the Channel, the National Crime Agency has said.
Yes, the men, 2 Sudanese nationals, aged 22 and 19, and a South Sudan national, aged 22, were all detained last night and this morning by the NCA and its partners in immigration enforcement. But now will now be questioned by those investigators from the NCA at a police station in Kent.
Yes, another 55 people who are believed to have been on board the boat, which arrived into the UK yesterday, have also been identified. They've now been through initial interviews, with further interviews likely to take place over the coming days. So let's just reiterate that 3 men have now been arrested for facilitating illegal immigration into this country following the death of 5 migrants in the Channel.
All from Sudan and South Sudan. And this follows this slightly confusing picture that we've got. With some reports that there were drownings, but other reports that actually individuals on board this boat were trampled, were crushed, which is incredibly concerning. It's not just the rickety nature of these boats, it's also the overcrowding in and of itself that is, apparently at least in this case, has been deadly.
Well, if we've been listening to Mark White over the past few weeks and months, he's been saying just how overcrowded these vessels are becoming, how people are being absolutely packed to the brim, all safety completely out of the window, just in order for the people smugglers to essentially make as much money as possible. So there you go. That's the breaking news for you this afternoon.
And, of course, we'll update you as that questioning goes on. But in other news, 4 people have been taken to hospital after military horses bolted right through central London.
Incredible scenes this. The City of London police confirmed that 2 escaped horses have been contained after they were seen running around the capital covered in what appeared to be blood. Quite extraordinary scenes. You don't often see that in central London.
You certainly don't. Well, a serviceman was thrown from his hort in Buckingham Palace Road, and one of the loose animals smashed into a taxi waiting outside Claremont Hotel, shattering the windows and likely causing that big splatter of blood.
Indeed, it's been reported that the horses were spooked during a household cavalry training exercise during which a soldier was injured. A horse also crashed into a parked double-decker tour bus, smashing the windscreen, and one crashed into a taxi, but no one was hurt. This is truly crazy. I mean, imagine that. You're walking down the road in central London past a cafe there, and you see a horse rampaging down the centre of the road coming at you.
No, it's amazing that more people haven't actually been hurt here.
Yeah.
But an army horse box was requested to collect these horses and transport them to veterinary care. So, just to repeat, the situation is now over, but my goodness, what an event.
I must say, some of the tabloid headlines of this one have been quite good. Horses and carnage. That's the only one I can remember, actually, so they can't have been that good.
No,
they can't have been that good. We've got horses loose in London. That tells you what we mean.
Yes.
That tells you what you can see.
It does, it does. It's an extraordinary story.
Extraordinary.
But moving on to what's going on in Parliament today, the future of the no-fault evictions ban. Well, that's hanging in limbo, but also big questions over what actually is this legislation trying to achieve. The Conservative Party, of course, promised this ban in its manifesto, but what is a ban on no-fault evictions? Indeed, what is a no-fault eviction?
Yes, what indeed is it? Now, there's been a bit of a row, hasn't there, between the Conservatives and the Labour Party over these reforms. Labour talking about how we need far, far more protections written into our law for tenants. But there is a lot of concern over what this means for landlords and what this might mean for the housing markets. There have been a record number of landlords just dropping out of the market altogether, haven't there?
Have indeed. But let's join now a policy officer at the union Acorn, Ben Leonard, to try and talk us through what's going on here. Ben, I think a lot of people hear the term no-fault eviction and they think that's people being chucked out of their home in the middle of the term for which they agreed to rent that property. But that's not what the bill's trying to do, is it? The bill's trying to abolish the concept of a fixed-term tenancy at all?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the situation we have now is one in which the short tenancies, which is what you're talking about, prime limited contract, are absolutely the norm. That's not what they were intended to be. They were intended to be a solution for a minority of cases in which that's suited both landlord and tenant. What we've seen them being used for is just across the board with all tenancies. And that creates a situation in which once you come into the end of that contract, the landlord can uproot your life and turf you out, despite them not, no fault and no reason. A common misconception, people think the end of a contract is the end of a tenancy. It's not. It's just the end of the contract. Tenancies do continue.
But Ben, why shouldn't a landlord be allowed to ask a tenant to leave at the end of the term for which they have agreed to stay in that property? Surely if I rent a property for 2 years and the landlord asks me to leave at the end of that 2-year period, why are you calling that a no-fault eviction?
Because somebody's being evicted through no fault of their own. Let's look at why shouldn't that be the case? Just why that shouldn't be the case. Well, look at the impact this is having on our families, on our communities. It's very difficult to put down roots and create the kind of stable community life that we all want when you can just, through no fault of your own and for no reason, be forced to uproot your life and be evicted.
Ben, if I book a hotel room for a week, I don't expect to stay in that hotel room longer than the week I book it for. Why is it any different for renting a flat?
Well, of course it's different. I mean, you're comparing a holiday and somebody's life, right? In fact, if you have children in a school, and you want the children to remain in that school, that's dependent on you being able to remain in the catchment area for that school. We are talking about people's lives. We are watching communities disintegrate. We have seen levels of antisocial behaviour rise you know, you don't have
Ben,
as
do you
much.
think we need? Do you think we need more? Do you think we need more landlords, Ben? Because I can't imagine many landlords would be happy to just have to keep a tenancy forever, essentially, dependent on whether they want to continue living in there. There has to be some kind of rules to protect landlords' property rights, surely.
Well, that's not what we're suggesting for this bill. You know, our suggestions in ACON and as part of the Renters Reform Coalition is that if a landlord needs to sell the property, if they need to move themselves or a family member in, fair enough. But you shouldn't be able to uproot someone's life for no reason and through no fault of their own. If a tenant's keeping up their end of the bargain, they're paying rent, you know, they're not acting in antisocial ways, and the landlord has no need for them to leave that property, why should they be able to get rid of that tenant through no fault of their own and without reason? It often becomes a backdoor for discrimination, a backdoor for, you know, getting around other types of protections that tenants have. And what we want to see is secure and stable housing. We want people to be able to, you know, get to know their neighbours, to be able to build, you know, people are often nostalgic for the kind of communities we had in the past. Those communities are predicated on stable and secure housing, and that's what we're trying to get through this bill, and that's what this bill is sadly failing to deliver.
But we can all agree that long-term tenancies are good. You can plant roots and all of the rest of it. Why don't we just encourage more long-term tenancies, rather than abolishing the idea of a fixed-term tenancy at all, rather than saying, actually, the property that this landlord owns isn't actually their property. They're not allowed to do with their property what they would. Why don't we just say, like they have in many other countries around the world, a standard tenancy isn't a year or two. A standard tenancy for some forms of agreement could be 10 years. Wouldn't that be a better solution that doesn't do away with property rights?
I mean, I'm confused why you think a flexible tenancy and open-ended tenancy does away with property rights. Nobody's suggesting that whatsoever.
It would be making it illegal for someone to sign a contract saying, I want to rent this property for this period of time, after which they may be removed. You're making that free choice illegal.
I mean, this is reminiscent, frankly, of the arguments they had when the minimum wage was introduced. You know, why shouldn't you be able to sign a contract in which you get paid poverty wages? When you're talking about a negotiation between two people in a situation of an imbalance of power, one person needs a home, the other person, you know, frankly, just needs to let the property out. The threat on one side is homelessness. Of course, that kind of negotiation will tend towards the interests of the landlord. What we're asking for then is protections so that tenants get a fairer deal. And you ask, there are millions of tenants in this country, you ask them if they think that we are in a fair and equitable situation right now. I'd be very surprised if you can find many who would. Right now, the system is totally rigged in favour of landlords. And one consequence of this, you know, there's plenty of research on this, and we've done our own, that shows many tenants will not complain about repairs because they can be turfed out without reference to those repairs. They can be evicted from their home through no fault and with no reason. What these reforms we want would introduce would rebalance things so that tenants would have more.
Yeah, I think the issue is it's not specific. It's not specific enough. But I'm sure we can all agree that one solution would be to build more homes so people have more choice. So it doesn't matter what type of contract they have because they can find somewhere else easier. Thank you very much indeed, Ben Leonard, Policy Officer at ACON.
I just find it's just a conceit, isn't it? Saying that it's an eviction at the end, after the fixed-term tenancy is over. That's leaving then. That's not an eviction. That's just leaving at the end of your tenancy.
No, I do get what he means. A lot of tenants are fearful of saying the wrong thing to their landlord, asking for too many things that they are actually legally
But they can't be evicted in the middle of their fixed term. It's only at the end of their fixed term that they can be evicted.
Yeah.
So it's not an eviction.
A lot of, it depends on the landlord. There are nasty, evil landlords, but there are also lots, and we need lots more, in my view, so we can't make it too difficult. But next, we're going to get an update after the former DUP leader, Jeffrey Donaldson, appeared in court accused of a number of historical sex offence charges. We'll be back very soon with that.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Rishi Sunak has come out fighting and declared war on what he's called the UK's sick note culture. The country's welfare state bill costs the average taxpayer now £2,000 every single year for every British taxpayer. Astonishing numbers, Catherine, simply mind-bending. 69 billion quid every year now goes on benefits. I paid my tax bill last month. Where did your tax go? I clicked on it. Long-term sickness and benefits is now second only to the NHS on what we spend our tax pound on. This is simply unsustainable.
That's exactly what the Prime Minister said. 69 billion a year on long-term sick and disability benefits, projected to rise to 90 billion by the end of the next Parliament if nothing has done. As he said, it is totally, totally unsustainable. And the message from Rishi Sunak really is, tough love. You're going to take your medicine. It's going to be good for you. You may not like it. Let's have a look at what he had to say earlier.
Everyone with the potential should be supported, and not just to earn, but to contribute and belong. And we must never tolerate barriers that hold people back from making their contribution and from sharing in that sense of self-worth that comes from feeling part of being something bigger than ourselves. And that is why this is a moral mission, and why the value of work is so central to my vision for welfare reform.
Certainly, Rishi Sunak said in the speech, in the period since the pandemic, something has gone wrong. Of course, millions of people had their wages paid by furlough. Now, that was an entirely artificial situation in an exceptional circumstance, but quite a lot of people left the workplace and simply haven't come back.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Now, for the latest on Jeffrey Donaldson, here's Doogie Beattie.
Well, yes, hello Tom, hello Emily. Yeah, this was one of the biggest news days I have seen in Northern Ireland for many, many years. And it shows you the political weight of Sir Jeffrey Donaldson. He is the longest serving MP from Northern Ireland. He arrived here in the media scrum this morning, and then, of course, he and his co-accused, his wife, Lady Eleanor Donaldson, appeared in the dock in the courthouse behind us. They faced 15 charges together. 11 of those were to Sir Jeffrey, 1 of rape, 1 of gross indecency, and 9 of sexual assault. His wife faces 4 charges of aiding and abetting. The court will meet once again on the 22nd of May.
Doogie, thank you. What an extraordinary story it is.
Yes, we'll come back to you for more updates later in the show, I'm sure. But first, let's get you quickly to the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The odd shower towards the south today, but otherwise it's fine with sunny spells, especially much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we've got an area of high pressure towards the northwest of the UK. However, we've still got this northerly breeze bringing cool conditions countrywide, and it's going to feel especially cool on the North Sea coast. Any showers in the south will disappear into the evening, but there'll be further showers into the north and east of Scotland, northeast England, and 1 or 2 developing across Wales and western England. Now, where we avoid the showers, where we get some clear spells, temperatures will fall away at such a frost first thing on Thursday. A chilly start, especially for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, central England. However, despite the chill, plenty of sunshine first thing. And we keep the largely fine and sunny weather for western Scotland, northwest England, for example. Elsewhere, a bit more cloud compared with today, and a few more showers developing particularly for parts of England and Wales, eastern Scotland. Still that cool breeze for the North Sea coast, 8 or 9 Celsius at best for some North Sea areas, but otherwise elsewhere into the double figures. Now, Friday starts off frosty, a chilly start in the east of England in particular, but otherwise...
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for 2 worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, it's 2 o'clock. Good afternoon, Britain. You're with me, Emily Carver, and Tom this hour.
We'll get an update on that breaking news story in South Wales. A school is in lockdown following reports of a stabbing. 3 people have been injured and 1 arrested.
And we're getting new lines linked to yesterday's tragedy in the Channel in which 5 people died attempting to cross to the UK. Police have arrested 3 men suspected of facilitating illegal immigration.
And more reaction to Rishi Sunak, who is on his European tour today in Berlin, saying that UK and Germany will provide unwavering support for Ukraine. But is he troubled at home?
Do you know what's interesting about this pledge for more defence spending? It is what a lot of people want to hear. Of course it is. It's something that senior military figures have been calling for years, and it's ramped up recently, of course, with all the talk of a potential World War III and all that, that we were being fed almost every day, it seemed, is whether cutting 72,000 civil service jobs will pay for it. Because if it's as easy as that, oh, we'll cut 72,000 civil service jobs and we'll be able to fund all this defence spending. Why do we have these 72,000 civil service jobs to cut? Surely there should be an element of efficiency before we get to this stage.
Rishi Sunak was saying that it would be a £75 billion investment in our defence. Are these civil servants being paid £1 billion each? No,
well,
that doesn't quite make sense.
That's dynamic maths, Tom.
That's terrible maths. That's really, really bad maths. Ignore me.
That's dynamic maths.
Are these civil servants being paid millions of pounds each, is what I should say?
Yeah, well, I mean, potentially, with all the all the pensions and all of that.
Basically, what it boils down to is the 75 billion figure is an accounting trick. Because it's pretending that the budget would have been flat anyway, rather than matching 2% of GDP. The difference is about £20 billion. But even so, 72,000 civil servants does not cost £20 billion. £20 billion was the entire contribution to the EU budget.
But it's not even that. It's if there are 72,000 civil servant jobs that could be cut to fund this defence spending pledge, why haven't they already been cut? To save us all money.
Well, the extraordinary thing is the civil service has been growing significantly by hundreds of thousands. So actually, a cut of 72,000 might not even make up for the increase that we've seen.
Let us know what you think about this defence spending pledge and whether cutting 72,000 civil service jobs is the right move. Will it fund it? But is it the right move anyway? Let us know. gbnews.com/your say. Should we get your headlines?
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 2. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. First, to some breaking news. 3 men have been arrested following the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl, in the English Channel yesterday. The National Crime Agency says they were arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. Those detained include 2 Sudanese men, aged 22 and 19, and a 22-year-old South Sudan national. It comes as figures from the Home Office show more than 400 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. Now to that developing story coming out of South West Wales. 3 people have been injured in a reported stabbing at a secondary school. Police say 1 person has been arrested after the incident at Aman Valley School. It's now in lockdown amid reports that a teacher is one of those who's been injured. Parents are reporting a large police presence in the area with 2 helicopters at the scene. We will bring you more information as we get it. Now, to other news, the Deputy Prime Minister took aim at Labour for failing to back the government's increased spending on defence. Standing in for Rishi Sunak, who's in Germany, Oliver Dowden began today's PMQs with a joke aimed at the Labour deputy's tax affairs, suggesting she might claim the House of Commons as her main residence. On the matter of defence, however, Mr Dowden said Labour had been silent on whether it backs investment in the armed forces.
In an increasingly dangerous world, the Prime Minister was able to announce his plan for the biggest strengthening of defence spending in a generation. But it should come as no surprise that the party opposite refused to say whether they back it or not. Because this comes from the Right Honourable Lady who voted to scrap Trident and install in Downing Street someone who wanted to change the army into a Peace Corps. There you have it.
Angela Rayner hit back, though, saying that Mr Dowden had been obsessing over her living arrangements while the government quietly cuts funds for the army.
The difference is that we haven't cut the army to its smallest size since Napoleon. And Mr Speaker, I read with interest that the Right Honourable Gentleman has been urging his neighbour in number 10 to call an election because he's worried they might get wiped out. Has he finally realised that when he stabbed Boris Johnson in the back to get his mate into number 10, he was ditching their biggest election winner for a pint-sized loser?
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says Britain will continue offering what he called unwavering support for Ukraine, as he appeared next to his German counterpart in Berlin this afternoon.
We meet as a war rages on our continent and new threats are rising around the world. And Olaf, I want to congratulate you on your leadership in recognising the Zeitenwende and you taking the historic decision to increase Germany's defence spending. And we stand here today together as the leading defence spenders in Europe, unshakable NATO allies and the 2 largest military supporters of Ukraine in Europe. And together we will continue to provide unwavering support for our Ukrainian friends as you said, for as long as it takes.
Meanwhile, in the US, the Senate voted overwhelmingly to pass a long-awaited aid package for Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan. It's expected to be quickly signed by President Biden, ending months of uncertainty over whether the United States would continue supporting Kyiv. It comes after the bill passed the House of Representatives on Saturday in a show of bipartisan support, despite considerable resistance among some Republicans. Ukraine's President Zelensky says it reinforces the US as a beacon of democracy. The former leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, has been released on bail. Northern Ireland's longest-serving MP was suspended from the DUP following his arrest last month for what's been described as historical sex charges, including one count of rape. His wife has also been charged with aiding and abetting in relation to the same investigation. In his resignation letter, he said he would be strenuously contesting the allegations. And several military horses on the loose in central London this morning have now been contained. Video posted to social media appeared to show one of the animals covered in blood. At least 4 people were injured as the animals galloped their way through the busy city streets. Westminster Police says they'll now be transported for care. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2. Now, a person has been arrested after 3 people were injured at a major incident at a school in South Wales.
Yes, Amman Valley School went into lockdown as emergency services arrived at the scene following the reported stabbing.
Well, joining us for more is Home and Security Editor for GB News, Mark White. Mark, what do we know?
Well, clearly a very worrying incident for parents. Dozens of parents turned up at this school outside wondering exactly what was happening and not being told an awful lot by the police. Pupils and staff were in lockdown in the school for quite some considerable time and were still in lockdown until at least about half an hour ago. We don't know the current situation, but given that Dyfed-Powys police have now confirmed that they have arrested one person, that they're not looking for anyone else in connection with this incident, I would imagine that if it has not already been lifted, then that lockdown will be lifting very soon indeed. But clearly, as I say, some concern, understandably, from parents here, given reports that 3 people have been injured. There are reports that a teacher may have been among those injured. We don't know at this stage the seriousness of the injuries sustained, but we do know that 2 air ambulances were sent to the scene along with a number of other paramedic vehicles to deal with those who were caught up in this incident. As I say, not a lot more detail in the form of what exactly it was. Dyfed-Powys police have put out a statement. They've said one person has been arrested and we are not looking for anyone else in connection with this incident. They go on to say emergency services remain at the scene and the school has been closed while investigations continue. We're working closely with the school and Carmarthenshire County Council. We are aware that there is footage, they said, of the incident currently circulating on social media. They say we would ask that this is removed to avoid contempt of court, because of course you've now got one person who is in custody, and clearly that video is quite disturbing for those who might know the people caught up in this incident as well. But a serious incident, without doubt, that unfolded at this school in Amman Valley in West Wales. We believe that the school is in the process of that lockdown being lifted, although understandably the school has closed as police investigate what happened.
Thanks, Mark. And if you don't mind, can we turn your attention to the English Channel, because you've got some breaking news to bring us as well on 3 arrests.
Yes, this has come from the National Crime Agency, who have confirmed that 3 men, all in their 20s, 2 that are Sudanese nationals, another from South Sudan, who have been arrested in connection, we're told, with the deaths of those 5 migrants in this incident in the English Channel just off the French coast north of Boulogne yesterday morning. Now, these men were arrested, some last night, another who was arrested this morning. They've been arrested on charges of facilitating illegal entry to the UK and also of illegally entering the UK themselves. But we're told by the National Crime Agency that the arrests are specifically connected to that tragedy in the English Channel early yesterday morning. And it comes with the confirmation, of course, also from the Home Office that 402 people crossed the English Channel yesterday in 7 small boats, including 58 people who were caught up in this tragedy. You're looking at exclusive images that GBNews has obtained in the middle of the English Channel showing that boat after the tragedy in which a number of people fell off the boat and into the sea. Being escorted by this French patrol boat because those on board had refused to come off and onto that patrol boat and be returned to France. They were determined, it seems, to make it to the UK, and indeed they did do that, and were picked up by the Dover lifeboat, as is routine, as is highly controversial, of course, and taken to Dover Harbour to the Border Force Processing Centre. We also saw, as these people arrived in Dover Harbour yesterday, police were waiting on the quayside and they stopped, photographed, questioned and searched all of those coming off that vessel. And of course, we now know 3 subsequent arrests in connection with this tragedy.
Really concerning stuff there. Well, Mark White, thank you for updating us on both those Home Affairs stories. Really appreciate it. I should say that the Home Secretary has released a statement in the last minute or so saying that he is being informed about the events in Wales, with his thoughts with the school and all those involved, saying it's important they're giving space to carry out their investigations. That's the police and emergency services.
Yes, there must be a number of very worried, concerned parents at that school, of course. But should we move on and get a little bit more on Rishi Sunak's visit to Berlin, where he's been announcing more security cooperation with Germany. This follows yesterday's announcement on a huge increase in UK defence spending.
Well, the Prime Minister said the UK and Germany would provide unwavering support for Ukraine and urged other European countries to stand against Russian aggression. Joining us is political editor Christopher Hope. Christopher, we don't often see Rishi Sunak striding the international scene. How did you think he did?
I think he's done quite well, viewed from Westminster. My colleague Catherine Forster is out with him in Berlin and Warsaw yesterday. The last time the PM went on a visit like this was to Egypt, to the COP climate summit. He's outsourced lots of the fun part of his job, which is frankly often travelling the world and doing the PR for this country, to former Prime Minister David Cameron, who of course has made the ground running with an energetic charge around the world, trying to ensure that there's money raised for Ukraine and the like. But I think the PM's done quite well. I think this announcement he made yesterday in Warsaw again, and talking about it again with Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, about defence spending, has hit the mark. Certainly with Tory MPs I've spoken to, he's facing problems next week already if the local elections don't go so well. According to the polls, that might be the case. And then you've got the mayoral elections too in some big cities, results out next weekend. They feel they've got a Tory PM who's doing right by them, and Labour haven't really got an answer. He has been challenged, though, I should say, in Berlin just now in a press conference. He was asked, can you keep cutting taxes as well as spend more on defence? And here's what he had to say.
It is the biggest strengthening of our national defence in a generation. It is fully funded, and it is based on the fact that we have a strong economy and an economic plan that is working. And you can see that when I came into this office and inflation was at 11%, it's now 3% and falling, energy bills coming down, interest rates to follow, growth returning. And it's because our economic plan is working that I'm able to make these announcements. And they are entirely consistent with our ability to keep cutting people's taxes.
There you have. That's the PM talking about cutting taxes. We are expecting probably an autumn statement when taxes should be cut, I imagine, in September, ahead of the probable November general election. What we're seeing today, Tom and Emily, is opening up a major election dividing line. The Labour Party will not commit to spending 2.5% on GDP on defence. They're saying wait for us to be elected, wait for a spending review. The Tory Party is going to go into the election with a cast iron, as they would see it, spending commitment funded by cutting civil service posts. In House of Commons in the past hour, it's been debated by Grant Shapps and his opposite number, John Healey. And Grant Shapps said at one point today in this debate that 11 members of the front bench of Labour Party voted against keeping Trident. So I think you can see a clear attack line opening up here of the Tory Party. Vote Tory and make the country more safe.
Well, there you go. Thanks, Christopher. Christopher Hope, our political editor, there live in Westminster. Tom, so you don't think he'll be too bothered about the pint-sized loser comment?
No, but he might be bothered.
Oh, so graceful Angela Rayner.
Might be bothered about something else. And I think we've got a picture of this. The flag layout at the conference. Let's see if we can get this up, because the former chief Brexit negotiator, Lord Frost, has been commenting on the idea that there was an EU flag behind Rishi Sunak at that press conference.
Shock horror, eh? Shock horror.
But normally you don't see this. When Rishi Sunak's on stage with Emmanuel Macron, it's the UK flag alone. And yes, of course, the French flag is next to the EU flag.
Yeah, but he's in Berlin. I mean, they're going to try and plonk the EU flag in there, aren't they?
But as Lord Frost says here, poor staff work from the number 10 team.
It'd be unsymmetrical, wouldn't it? Or asymmetrical?
It often is. When Germany's on stage...
So you think you could have the Union Jack, the German flag there, the EU there, and then... So it would be unbalanced, wouldn't it? Imbalanced.
There are lots of pictures of imbalance and unbalance with Rishi Sunak, as I say, talking to other European leaders, where they don't put the EU flag next to the...
I'm not sure this is Rishi Sunak's biggest PR blunder. But I take your point. I take your point. Why is the EU flag there? It probably shouldn't be there. Although, remember when we were watching Lee Anderson, when he defected to Reform and he had a flag right in front of his face, though that wasn't an EU flag.
No, that was a British flag.
That was our flag.
Perhaps a larger PR blunder. But next...
It's always flags, isn't it?
It is always
flags. It's always flags.
Flags, frogs and Englishmen.
Yeah, the NHS with its 40 gender flags, you know.
Well, there you go. Next, we'll be getting an update after the former DUP leader, Jeffrey Donaldson, appeared in court accused of a number of historical sex offence charges. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GBNews.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Squatters in London have taken over a pub which is leased by Gordon Ramsay, no less. The pub is currently up for sale with a guide price of £30 million. It is understood that Kitchen Nightmares host Ramsay called the police on Wednesday but was unable to have the squatters removed. The Metropolitan Police said in a statement they were made aware of squatters at a disused property but added, this is a civil matter and so police did not attend the property. Let's see what my panel make of this. Why can't we just boot squatters out? If we own a property or lease a property, why don't we just boot them out?
I know that's tempting, but the fact is, long-term empty properties have increased by 24% in the last 6 years. There's 1.2 million people on the social housing lists. People don't have a place to live.
What it does highlight is the enormous disparity in fairness in property laws in this country. It's just not fair that if you've worked all your life and invested some money in property because, you know, interest rates at zero and there's nowhere else to invest your money, and then suddenly somebody who's got no claim to that property and doesn't seem to have earned very much in life takes over your property. It's an outrage.
People shouldn't be squatting in other people's homes or commercial properties. But the fact is, until we sort the housing problem in this country, none of this is going to go away. The fact is, people my age won't be able to buy a home unless they've got a bung from their parents.
Yeah, but what's the practicality of this demonstration?
It's not a demonstration.
It's not going to free up more housing for people who are on the streets.
No, of course not. It's people looking to find a place to live. I don't think it's a demonstration at all.
It's an anti-wealth, anti-property-owning demonstration by people who've got nothing better to do in life than break into other people's property.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 22 minutes past 2. Now, the former DUP leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, arrived at Newry Magistrates Court this morning, accused of a number of historical sex offence charges, including one count of rape.
Yes, he has now been released on continuing bail after a rather brief court appearance. Joining us now for the latest is our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie. Dougie, we cut a little bit short earlier. Can you please tell us exactly what he's been accused of, and his wife too?
Well, good afternoon, Tom and Emily. And yes, I have been a member of the media for decades in Northern Ireland, and today was one of the biggest news days I have seen in a long while. That gives you an idea of the scale of this political leader and the scale of the arrest and what shockwaves it have had through Northern Ireland. When Sir Geoffrey arrived here earlier on, he and his co-accused lady Eleanor Donaldson arrived separately. They both had to run the gauntlet of the media as they went through, and as they appeared in the dock together, they were flanked by two officers. Together there is 15 charges, 11 of those on Sir Geoffrey, one of rape, one of gross indecency, and 9 of sexual abuse. Eleanor Donaldson faces 4 separate charges of aiding and abetting, and this all happened over a 21-year period from 1985 to 2006. Now, they were both released on bail, and the court will meet again on the 22nd of May. But as they left the court, and it was all over within about 5 or 10 minutes, but as they left the court, security was getting really quite edgy about what was going on, because crowds of people had got in amongst the media and were shouting abuse and pushing and shoving, surrounded the car at one stage, and it was really, the two of them were quite frightened and quite shaken by what had happened. So the trial will go on the 22nd of May. I need to say at that point, that is only to hear more evidence. Sir Geoffrey and his wife will not be asked to appear at that trial.
Dougie, are there any conditions on their bail?
Yes, well, the condition was at the start, of course, when he was released, or when he was arrested on the 24th of March, was that he and his wife had to live separately. And of course, Sir Geoffrey went to London to live. We do believe now that has been rescinded, and that he can now live in Northern Ireland along with his wife, but there is still conditions that they cannot contact any of those that are accused or any of the potential victims in this case.
Really concerning stuff. Dougie Beattie, thank you for being across it for us here on GB News.
Yes, incredible story for Northern Ireland. We'll bring you the latest when we get it, but let's move on to something a little bit different. One of Britain's big 4 accountancy firms is now hiring former prisoners. That's in an attempt to cut reoffending rates.
Yes, KPMG is one of the first businesses to take on ex-offenders under a new scheme led by the Ministry of Justice. The new hires have been joined in a range of positions and describe it as a lifeline.
Well, joining us now is a former prisoner and founder of User Voice, Mark Johnson. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Why do you suspect KPMG is doing this?
Well, I think it's the very easy thing to do in the whole grand scheme. I think there'll be all sorts of government contracts available. for people who seem to hire prisoners and stuff. But here's the thing. Yesterday, there was a really damning report from the ex-inspector of prison and actually successive ex-members damning the prison conditions and stuff. And I think this is like a bit of a smokescreen, really, a bit of a veneer. We know that 30% of all of first-time prisoners won't reoffend on release, and all of these schemes are targeted for this group of people. When we've got a group, I call them the subterranean group, that exists within prison, you know, drug addicted, mentally ill, repeat offenders, and worst is the increase in sentences. I mean, sentences of 10 years or more have tripled over the last 10 years. So there's just a massive group of people that we're not talking about. So this is like it's a bit of a smokescreen, really. I mean, the other thing is KPMG are a accountancy company. There are other companies that offer employment, but we're not tackling the causes and the reasons that people are in prison.
Mark, why was it, if you don't mind talking a bit about your own personal story, why was it that you were able to be reformed, that in a sense prison worked for you, but for so many people it hasn't?
No, prison didn't work for me. Prison could have worked for me, right? So there's a huge difference. When you've got people who are a risk to society, themselves and society, their children, they're drug addicts, they're just a menace, to society and stuff. There's an element of public protection. So you get sentenced, you get incarcerated, removed from society. It's that opportunity that you've got to help people to change. And I'm talking, my help isn't what you probably think that it is, of pandering to my need. The help that I would offer is denial bashing, because all these people are so deluded that their lifestyles are successful, etc., that they're just in this, as I said, subterranean existence of going in prison, and nobody tackles the reasons that they're there or their thinking. So prison could offer that opportunity, but it doesn't. So my personal story was, I got out of prison, I lived on the streets of Westminster as a drug addict for such a long time that the drugs stopped working, and it was a community action team worker with lived experience, i.e. somebody who'd got clean themselves, that knows how to talk and knows how to engage with me, that they got me into residential detox. Now, let me tell you about that. 60% of prisoners who are addicted to heroin in this country today, this is the MOJ statistics, over all the 120 odd prisons, 60% don't even make it to a GP surgery or a prescribing services on release from prison today. 60%. So there's one prison in the north where it's 85%. They're coming out of prison after spending the Dame Carol Black's review of just the government's put 300 million into drug treatment services in prison.
And it was that detox treatment service that then got you back onto the right path.
Yeah, but 3 residential treatment centres I went to, Westminster Council paid £20,000. Now, those 3 have closed. Right? If you don't have family or money, like £9,000 average figure, you will not get a detox off opiate addiction in this country. Okay, you will not, and so all of this stuff around employment is like, if we've got an epidemic of very mentally ill, deluded group of people with very severe and chronic addiction issues, which not only they suffer with, but we suffer with as a society because of their criminogenic, the factors to it, stealing, etc. This is just like tinkering. And it's what I'm going to say is like 25 justice ministers and prison ministers over the last 12 years, and all you get is this real veneer, this rhetoric of going, yes, it's employment. It isn't. It's addressing the causes of crime.
Absolutely. I'm sure you're right, Mark. I'm sure you're absolutely right. And great to hear a little bit about your story too. We're going to have to leave it there. but good to speak to you. I'm sure we'll speak again. Mark Johnson, former prisoner and founder of User Voice. I mean, £20,000 for treatment for one person. Expensive, isn't it?
No, and especially when councils are having to cancel weekly bin collections, it sort of puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, we're going to discuss the impact of lockdowns next. On school children, are we getting a bit thicker as a nation? Are we getting more stupid?
Goodness me, I couldn't possibly comment. We're also going to be talking about the 20-mile-per-hour U-turn in Wales. That's all after your news with Sophia Wensler.
Tom, thank you. It's 2:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. 3 men have been arrested following the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl in the English Channel yesterday. The National Crime Agency says they were arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. Those detained include 2 Sudanese men, aged 22 and 19, and a 22-year-old South Sudan national. It comes as figures from the Home Office show that more than 400 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. More on that developing story coming out of South West Wales. 3 people have been injured in a reported stabbing at a secondary school. Police say 1 person has been arrested after the incident at Amman Valley School. It's now in lockdown amid reports that a teacher is one of those who's been injured. The Home Secretary is aware and says his thoughts are with the school and all those involved. To other news, the Deputy Prime Minister took aim at Labour for failing to back the government's increased spending on defence. Standing in for Rishi Sunak, who's in Germany, Oliver Dowden said Labour had been silent on whether it backs investment in the armed forces. Angela Rayner hit back, though, saying that Mr Dowden had been obsessing over her living arrangements while the government quietly cuts funds for the army.
The difference is that we haven't cut the army to its smallest size since Napoleon. And Mr Speaker, I read with interest that the Right Honourable Gentleman has been urging his neighbour in number 10 to call an election because he's worried they might get wiped out. Has he finally realised that when he stabbed Boris Johnson in the back to get his mate into number 10, he was ditching their biggest election winner for a pint-sized loser?
And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A fine spring day for most of us today. Dry, sunny spells, the odd shower here and there, most likely across southern parts of the country. We've got higher pressure to the northwest. That's where the sunniest skies will be across much of Scotland, into Northern Ireland, northwest England, North Wales as well. Elsewhere, a cloud building and South Wales, southwest England, East Anglia could see the odd shower, but these will be few and far between. For the vast majority, is a dry afternoon. And in the sunshine and with light winds towards the northwest, although temperatures aren't going to be very exciting, it's going to feel fairly pleasant. Still this cool breeze down the North Sea coast, 9 or 10 Celsius on the cool side for the time of year. Into the evening, the cloud will tend to thin and break in places, but there'll be further showers coming into the northeast for a time, and then some cloud development and some showers into parts of Wales, western England as well. With the cloud, temperatures will stay up at 4 or 5 Celsius, but where we do see some clear spells, well, it's going to be a frosty start on Thursday, especially for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. A chill in the air first thing, but plenty of sunshine here, and actually it stays largely dry towards the northwest once again, whilst I think a cloudier day is expected elsewhere, particularly into the afternoon where there'll be some showers for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. Highs of 13 or 14 Celsius.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to North Yorkshire. Firstly, on the southbound side of the A1M, Barrow Bridge, junction 48 to Allerton Park 47 remains closed off. Big queues back towards the Dishforth interchange of route through Harrogate and Knaresborough struggling, all due to investigation work there. The anti-clockwise M25 around Kings Langley, junction 20. Now, the exit slip road there is closed off. Queues back on the main carriageway, all due to a collision now safely on the hard shoulder. Milton Keynes and the The A5's blocked just at the moment at the Abbey Hill roundabout, causing queues. This one is due to an earlier collision. And the Upper Richmond Road in East Sheen in London, the A205 is closed both ways between Waitrose and Milton Road and causing queues. This one, and that's for ongoing investigation work there too. And for now, that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's 2:37. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, researchers have warned that the damaging legacy of the pandemic will mean poorer GCSE results well into the 2030s.
Yeah, this is academics at the universities of Exeter, Strathclyde and the London School of Economics predicting that fewer than 2 in 5 pupils in England will achieve a grade 5 or above in English and maths GCSEs. Now, for those of us that have literally no clue what that means, that's roughly equivalent to a grade C.
Yes, and before that, the old O-levels, which apparently were much harder.
Much tougher.
Much tougher. Let us know if you did the O-levels, were they more difficult than these GCSEs? But yes, the question is, are young people now, our pupils, as a result of the lockdown, getting stupider? Are they less educated? Are they less equipped to deal with exams and the like? It does seem like it, if this study is correct. Joining us to discuss this is the principal of LVS Ascot, Christine Cunniff. I mean, very worrying. Thanks, Christine, for joining us. Very, very worrying that lots and lots of pupils won't be achieving basic grades in their GCSEs.
Yeah, and I think this was an issue when we came out of COVID, when everyone was saying about the children who miss their exams, for example. But back then, there was a lot of debate about that it would take decades to recover from COVID, not just a couple of years. And it's not about our young people. And I'm really conscious about using the words like stupid and things like that, because it's not the case. These kids have been through quite a lot. Attitudes to education have changed. There's a lot about our education system that needs to be changed. For example, we're still teaching a very antiquated curriculum in exam halls with exams that are not fit for purpose. And remember that 700,000 children during COVID could not access their education because they couldn't access online education.
So how is it the case that something that is now sort of mercifully so far back in the past, 2 years ago, plus was the last lockdown, how is it having this sort of rippling effect well into the future?
Well, the thing is, the children had 2 years of disrupted education, and so therefore you're not going to gain that back in a couple of years. And so children in schools have had to play catch up over this time, and also get back into the rigours of education. There's also more children not in school than ever before now, and over 100,000 actually been homeschooled. So we're in a predicament here where we've got to get children back in class. We need them in front of specialist teachers because we can't lose sight of the fact there is a recruitment crisis in this country. And many children are in maths and English classes where those teachers in front of them are not specialists in their subjects. So it's nothing to do with the children. It's not their fault. Children come first. It's about time, government, whatever government that is, gives an education to our children that is fit for purpose for the future.
Christine, a lot of people are quite angry, of course, with the government for allowing schools to be shut down. But we have to remember that nearly all of the teaching unions, possibly all of the teaching unions, were very keen to keep the lockdowns on the schools for a long, long, long time. And is it now the case that they may have done irreparable damage to children's future life outcomes as a result?
I think nobody knew what the best way to deal with COVID is. It's all very well as looking back and saying we should have done this and we should have done that. Nobody knew what the best thing was to do back then. But we have to look forward, and we have to look forward positively as well, and identify what those challenges are, and maybe spend less time thinking about what happened and how we put it right for the future so it doesn't happen again.
Wise words. Well, Christine Cunliffe, that's all we have time for, but thank you so much for joining us, the principal of LVS Ascot School there. Thank you very much.
Well, actually, I think we need to find out who was wrong, what went wrong exactly, so that we can prepare for the future.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't learn any lessons, do you? It's all well and good having positive forward-looking, which is fantastic, and I agree. But you also need to work out, were the teaching unions wrong to ask the government to keep those lockdowns?
I think that it is actually remarkable how quickly sort of pandemic preparedness discussion has just sort of evaporated from our conversation. I mean, it's likely we'll see another pandemic in our lifetimes. What with the sort of the way people are mixing now, the way that globalisation is rearing forwards, we should be having these conversations.
And if you miss those crucial years of education, you're unlikely to build up that knowledge in the future, which is why I use the rather rude term stupid. I mean, it's not what I meant. I meant sort of less educated as a result of these lockdowns. If you lose your crucial education at one age, you're unlikely to be able to, get it all back.
Well, still to come, the possible U-turn on the Welsh 20-mile-an-hour speed limit across all urban areas. Well, that could cost taxpayers millions. Plus a touching story about a Chelsea pensioner and how he celebrated his 102nd birthday. All to come on Good Afternoon Britain. See you shortly.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
We're now going to talk about Meghan and Harry. There was a polo match they took part in Miami, and we've got Angela Evan, royal correspondent here. So, what have you picked up from this this polo match?
Well, the interesting thing is that the polo thing that's going to be photographed and filmed for Netflix, this is Harry's one.
Yes.
But there was Meghan centre stage, and she stood there holding the treasurer.
Yes.
And actually, who she pushed around was a doctor, Dr. Sophie Chankuka, who's chair of Santabile, the charity that they're doing it for. And she was asked if she would take the trophy. And she said, yes, that's why she came, because the money from the polo match is going to this charity. And Meghan had to push her out the way because she wanted to be in the middle. I've never heard such a disgusting, rude thing to do.
That at the end of the day, she's an actress. She knows how to take centre stage.
Yes, but this was bullying.
Actual physical pushed her.
No, she didn't actually physically push her, but she wanted to go next to Harry because it was her charity. And so she bent down under the trophy and then went the other side of Meghan, and then she's all smiling. I mean, that turns my stomach, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody would know that that's not appropriate. Let Harry have a little thing of his own. He scored the goal that made them win, and you'd think she would be really pleased. He pecked his lips, he pecked her lips. It wasn't actually a great passionate kiss, as the paper said, because it didn't last more than a second. It's just crushed him to nothing.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The People's
Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2:45. Now, the Welsh blanket 20-mile-an-hour speed limit could be raised back to 30 miles an hour in September of this year.
You couldn't make it up, could you? You couldn't make this up. So they introduced this deeply unpopular policy and then almost an immediate U-turn, perhaps. Well, the Welsh Transport Secretary, Ken Skates, revealed that the U-turn could cost up to £5 million.
But the government was unable to confirm how many speed limits will actually change, as the decision was up to local councils.
Well, the council's going to do it or not do it, if it's up to them. More confusion. This comes as 500,000 people signed a petition to rescind the 20 miles per hour law. Now, that is quite a big petition. There's lots of these little signature petitions that go around, but they rarely get 500,000 people.
The population of Wales is about 3 million people.
Yeah.
That's 1 in 6 people in Wales signed this one petition. It's extraordinary.
Unless the English or the Northern Irish are getting involved.
Oh,
or the Scottish.
I suppose you have to put your postcode in.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
Well, shall we speak to Quentin Wilson, the motoring journalist, to join us with this discussion? Quentin, I think everyone can agree 20-mile-an-hour zones outside schools, for example, very, very sensible. But in every urban area in the country, I mean, surely that weighs insanity.
Well, it was a bit of a lump hammer approach, and it's a lot like the LTNs, the local traffic neighbourhoods, where it was done kind of on an ideological basis, and there was no kind of data or clear empirical research done. And the thing with speed limits on roads is that we know, because we've got these killed and serious injury stats, KSIs, which roads are really dangerous and which roads need a reduced speed limit. And to put a blanket speed limit over all roads, as we can see with this unprecedented level of objection from the public, is not the right way of doing it. So I mean, this is Ken Skates should be applauded for doing this U-turn. I mean, it's embarrassing for the Welsh government, but it needs to be done, and this needs to be proportionate. We need to look at roads on an individual basis, because we've seen the kind of, you know, the rejection of this, and the big problem here is that if you get the public rejecting road safety initiatives to reduce casualties, the biggest tragedy of all.
But Quentin, if it's now up to local councils to decide, that's going to take forever, isn't it? You can imagine the local councils meeting to discuss this. You'll have representatives from different groups. They'll have to do consultations and the like. That's going to be costly as well.
Well, hopefully not. And that data that I talked about, they should access that, they should look at it, they should have that on file and be able to say this road, for various reasons, it could be road engineering because it's dangerous. It could be, as you said in your intro, because of vulnerable pedestrians, schools, old people's homes, hospitals, all that sort of thing. You can make these decisions pretty quickly. And we would hope to restore public confidence in this, that they do it much, much quicker than you're supposing, with lots of committees and lots of steering groups and all that nonsense. It needs to be done fast so the public get confidence back in road safety initiatives.
Well, no, it does seem like it's a welcome U-turn, if indeed it is a U-turn. Not all confirmed yet, but Quentin Wilson, thank you very much for joining us and talking through that significant issue for Wales.
It reminds me of New Zealand when they immediately U-turned on their tobacco policy, on their generational ban, which we are deciding to implement. Yes, you sort of make this big key flagship policy and then immediately, oops, this isn't really working out how we thought it was going to.
Hope
but anyway,
we can do that in the UK with our generation.
Yeah, maybe.
Lastly, the last surviving member of a Special Forces regiment during World War II has fulfilled his dream to dine at the Ritz Hotel in London, celebrating his 102nd birthday in style.
Some lovely news. Chelsea pensioner John Morris volunteered for the Raiding Support Regiment and took part in the Allied invasion of Italy.
Well, GB News correspondent Cameron Walker went to meet him.
War is not glamorous. We thought it was, actually, when you're young.
John Morris is the last surviving member of his SAS regiments from the Second World War. Before joining the Special Forces, his service began in Kent, shooting down German bombers targeting London.
The only thing I shot down actually was a chimney, kitchen chimney, accidentally by mistake. Nobody had any breakfast that morning. I wasn't very popular.
John was one of the last people to receive a 100th birthday card from Queen Elizabeth II.
All birthday cards from the children from Christchurch School.
Celebrating his 102nd birthday this week, local school children made him cards, thanking him for his bravery.
I think kids should know more about the sacrifice their forefathers made. Not me, I'm no hero, but all the RAF boys have died, and people like that, they don't realise that. They don't know much about it. They don't even know who Hitler was, half of them.
John, who's now a Chelsea pensioner, kindly agreed to share his wartime memories. In 1943, he was sent to North Africa with the Royal Artillery and passed Special Forces selection, taking part in the Allied invasion of Italy.
75,000 British and colonial troops were killed in Italy. The Germans fought back very well.
Ultimately, the Allies were successful, but a much more powerful natural threat was not far away. Mount Vesuvius, famous for destroying the Roman town of Pompeii in AD 79, erupted.
I woke up in the morning, heard this rumble, looked outside, this wall of lava coming down. So never go on a volcanic island where I am, because it's very dangerous.
That year, Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy. Known as D-Day, the operation led to the liberation of Western Europe and was one of the most famous and widely praised successes of the war. Far away in Italy, John and his comrades were branded with a less than flattering nickname, turned into a popular wartime song.
We've already done 3 D-Days. We did the North African landing, we did the Battle of Britain, and we did the Italian landing, we did the Yugoslavia, Albania, and they called us D-Day Dodgers.
John celebrated his 102nd in style. First a party with the Chelsea pensioners, followed by a champagne lunch organised by friend and Irish Guards ambassador Frederike Crum.
The Ritz always had a wonderful relationship with the Chelsea pensioners. We celebrate in style, and he's never been to the Ritz, so that will be worthy of the 102nd birthday. Right, John?
That's right.
Cameron Walker, GB News.
Heartwarming story there.
I'd love to live to 102.
Oh yeah, no, it would be. Well, I'd love to live to 102 if I was living life as full as we could see on screen there. I think there's a question mark as to whether I would if I wasn't sort of.
If you were unwell and not living your life.
To dine out at the Ritz, I'm not sure. Not sure I'd like my 102nd birthday.
Well, there you go. There's a goal for you. A life goal, 102, dining out at the Ritz. We should all aim for that, I guess.
Well, that's it from us today, but don't worry, because, of course, up next is the one and only Martin Daubney, who joins us now. Martin, what's coming up on your programme?
Well, I'll tell you, whatever John Morris is drinking at 102 to look that young, I'd like a pint of it on my show today. Yes, last night we saw the police on horseback steaming into a St George's Day rally, and then they closed every pub in Westminster. I know, I was there. There was no trouble. What are the police playing at? I'll be joined by a barrister who thinks now this is turning into a war on the white working classes as we build up to yet another pro-Palestine march today at Parliament. You can bet your Nelly they won't get the same treatment. Plus, 55 people came to Britain yesterday on a dinghy fit for 20 and 5 died. We're paying £500 million to the French every year to protect our coast. They simply aren't doing it. Is it time to stop the money? Plus, are Muslim gangs taking over British jails? And environmental activists say we don't need coal or gas anymore. I think they're deluded, and I'll be joined by an expert to tell you why. That's all up on my show, 3 till 6 p.m. But first, it's time for your latest weather forecast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The odd shower towards the south today, but otherwise it's fine with sunny spells, especially much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we've got an area of high pressure towards the northwest of the UK. However, we've still got this northerly breeze bringing cool conditions countrywide, and it's going to feel especially cool on the North Sea coast. Any showers in the south will disappear into the evening, but there'll be further showers into the north and east of Scotland, northeast England, and 1 or 2 developing across Wales and western England. Now, where we avoid the showers where we get some clear spells. Temperatures will fall away at such a frost first thing on Thursday. A chilly start, especially for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, central England. However, despite the chill, plenty of sunshine first thing. And we keep the largely fine and sunny weather for western Scotland, northwest England, for example. Elsewhere, a bit more cloud compared with today, and a few more showers developing, particularly for parts of England and Wales, eastern Scotland. Still that cool breeze for the North Sea coast, 8 or 9 Celsius at best for some North Sea areas, but otherwise elsewhere into the double figures. Now, Friday starts off frosty, a chilly start in the east of England in particular, but otherwise a few showers and some sunny spells expected. More unsettled weather arrives from the south through the weekend.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Nigel Farage, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, and we're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, we'll get an update on that breaking story in South Wales. A school is in lockdown following reports of a school stabbing. 3 people have been injured and 1 has been arrested. We'll have all the latest. Elsewhere, 3 people have been arrested after 5 migrants died in the latest Channel tragedy yesterday. And now it's emerged that French police stood by and simply allowed a dinghy crammed with a record 112 people